He spent his entire life creating the world's greatest bloodline and in search of the fruit of eternal life. Well, the fruit didn't lie entirely. He reincarnated 1,000 years later to inspect his own descendants. What he finds is a clan that has forgotten what true strength really means. This time, he has no interest in ruling the clan or reclaiming his old position. He only wants to surpass the strength of his previous life, no matter who tries to stand in his way. He strove for the heights of martial arts and realized that a lifetime would not be enough to achieve them. Gilfus breathed a sigh of relief and thought he would refute this truth and hunt for an ancient legend. Deep within a sanctuary, guarded by a divine dragon, lies a golden fruit. People say that this fruit grants the power of immortality. Gilfus realized this was true, and he found himself near that very tree. He saw the fruit of immortality and scratched the back of his head, realizing that he had defeated the divine dragon that lay behind him. His entire body was wounded and bloodied, causing him to groan in pain, but he nevertheless grabbed the fruit of immortality and declared that with this, he could still reach the heights of martial arts. He immediately bit into it. The protagonist is an Eldragon, a man known as the strongest in the world. After several decades, he has aged. It is only a matter of time. He is aging, so he suggests that they at least let him pass away peacefully. His family was next to him, his hand held by his son, Gilliam, who was worried and whispering, "No, father." He was the eldest son of the Eldragon clan, and Gilfus looked at him with a tired expression, already dying. He asked him not to make such a pitiful face, because his time had simply come. Gilliam smiled and said that this place would be so empty without his mother and father. But Gilfus told him not to be so weak. After all, those legends couldn't be trusted. But he was still lucky. He had a wife and child. His beloved children, he, Gilfus, had lived more than enough years, and he had no regrets. But he mentally told himself not to say that nonsense, because of course he does. If he had time, even just a little more time, he could have reached the heights of martial arts. At that moment, Gilliam began to cry, and thus, Gilfus the Eldragon ended his life's journey. As it turned out, he was born a baby, and when he woke up, he wondered if he had really been asleep. What is this wallpaper and this outbuilding? His body feels strange. He looked at his hands and couldn't figure out what kind of child's hands they were. Suddenly, he realized, had he really become a baby? He looked around and tried to remain calm. Involving someone like a 10-star in such a precarious situation without being noticed was clearly abnormal. Who could have done this and how? Suddenly, he remembered, could it really be that same fruit that helped him? Now, everything became clear. The fruit's effect wasn't immortality, but reincarnation. He hadn't expected this, but it was incredible luck. Now he could finally reach the pinnacle of martial arts. At that moment, he lay in a crib with babies who had also begun crying around him. He realized there were a bunch of other children here, and since he was in the outbuilding, that meant he had been reborn into a family or a dragon. But why were so many babies gathered here? He saw a servant or dragons enter to get milk cans and a red jug. Apparently, it was feeding time. What can you do? They're just babies? Suddenly, one of the maids told another to get ready, and she grabbed a goblin and handed the creature a red liquid. Gilfus didn't understand why the goblin was there and what they were planning. At that moment, when the goblin finished drinking the bloody liquid, they cut it and the blood spilled right on his crib. Gilfus was scared and didn't understand what just happened. The maids were discussing that if this was the case, then everything should be safe and they should feed them. He was scared and didn't understand at all what they were giving them to drink. He was also given a bloody liquid and asked, "Isn't this milk? What kind of liquid is this, exuding such strong power? Giving something like this to a baby is dangerous." But he immediately drank it and understood his instincts. Damn, he forgot that he was a baby now. Is this the blood of an ancient dragon? What are these idiots thinking? Forcing them to drink this? So that's why they diluted it. This was bad. He needed to spit it all out, but he'd already swallowed a little, and a small dose shouldn't kill him. All the children began coughing up the foul liquid, and he realized the other babies were also instinctively spitting it out, and he needed to do it before it ripped him apart. But was that bad? Suddenly he realized this was an opportunity. If he absorbed all this power, he could even transform himself and reach the heights of martial arts. Gilfus realized that for some unknown purpose, he would seize this chance. At that moment, a bright energy appeared in his veins, and he realized he shouldn't be underestimated. He was, after all, an Eldragon, but they shouldn't underestimate Gilfus. And when he realized this, the maid was dumbfounded. She realized this child was drinking this liquid. Gilfus thought that he had absorbed all the dragon's power and could then reach the heights of martial arts, even those available to him in his past life. He grabbed the bottle and began drinking even faster. Thoughts from the dragon flashed through his head, and he realized that absorbing it was surprisingly easy. No, even perfect. How did he do it? And the other babies seemed to have survived as well, and the survival instinct of a baby can't be underestimated. Damn, as expected from a child's body, he suddenly felt sleepy. He stuck a finger in his mouth and decided to go to sleep. 7 years later, he had already grown up. Gilfus, upside down, balanced a stone on his legs with one hand. He thus performed 999 push-ups. Moments later, he tossed the stone aside and, landing, said that he still had the same beautiful physique as before. The former head of the Eldragon family, Gilfus, and now Zik Eldragon. All this is thanks to the blood of the ancient dragon. All living beings have power, and the blood of the ancient dragon who forced Zik and the others to drink contained incredible source power. Babies who consumed it to varying degrees gained much greater strength than ordinary people. The combined power sources of the divine dragon he defeated in his past life reside within him. Zik is the only infant to have completely absorbed the ancient dragon's power. He underwent changes that surprised even himself. A bright magic glowed within his chest, and he still only had 1 star. But the situation with stars was a disaster. By now, he should have reached at least 4 stars. Stars are his own source power, compressed to the limit. The body is considered a universe within which these stars float, and the more stars a person has, the stronger they become. Generating new stars becomes increasingly difficult with each passing day, and Zeke, in his past life as Gilfus, the El Dragon, had reached an unprecedented 10 stars. He was the only such being in the world, and yet time flies. 7 years have passed since his reincarnation as the illegitimate child of the current El Dragon family head. He realized that his mother had already passed away, and his father had never shown his face. He doubts his qualities as a father, and more importantly, it's been 1,000 years, right? Being reincarnated was surprising enough, but to have it happen with a difference of 1,000 years. Before he knew it, this world had turned into a brutal survival test. This is a prime example of what forces infants to drink the blood of an ancient dragon, a ritual called the Dragon Trial. Only infants who survive this trial can receive training as Eldragons. At that moment, he noticed the maid with him and realized that this was how it should be. Zeke said he couldn't find the answers to his questions. No mentor had come to him for 7 years. Was that strange? She replied that those who pass the trials receive combat training, right? Zeke responded, so why are there only maids here? Zeke asked, is there a problem with that? No, he's not complaining. It's just that right now, physical fitness is more important to him than combat training. He can do that himself. He would like to get at least some information about the other children or the head of the family. What did she think? The maid replied that she was afraid she couldn't answer his question. But he replied, he's just talking about family matters. Does she understand? The maid repeated that she couldn't answer that question, and Zik asked, isn't she being too harsh on him? She replied that they were perfectly fine simply taking care of his daily needs. She was a 3rd-level star practitioner. She would be sufficient for basic combat training, but that didn't matter. Living together for 7 years and only interacting minimally was too strange. He turned around, while the maid stared at him silently, and wondered if she had finally ignored him. When he entered the forest, he plucked a special bush and ate it immediately. It was a poisonous herb that he found disgusting. But that was the main thing. It was also part of the training. He had to develop patience, but that constant gaze watching him made him desperately want them to do something. When he turned around, he realized he hadn't expected them to show up over such trivial matters. If they really had something to say, they should come out and say it right now. Zik peered out from the bushes and realized there was someone there. It was the Boar of Rage, the Black Mist. Such a thing hadn't existed 1,000 years ago. What was that thing? The boar twitched its nose and immediately appeared in front of him. The creature suddenly began running toward him, and Zik smiled, expecting the attack. Suddenly, the boar rushed past him, and Zik swung his fist, aiming for the creature's belly. When he did, the boar flew off and cried out in pain. Zik remarked that this light touch of something of the same level gave him such power. The quality of the stars really was important. He was tired of being neglected. Maybe he should go on a journey? He grabbed the boar and carried it home. If there was anywhere to go, it would be to the sea. A young man sitting nearby behind a tree watched everything unfold and didn't understand what was happening. Without learning from anyone, he manifested 1 star and defeated the Fury Boar with a single blow. More importantly, he noticed its hidden presence and that this child was abnormal. His mother died early. His father showed no interest in the child. It is impossible for such a child to receive a proper education. However, since he has the blood of the family head, he won't be allowed to simply escape and is constantly being watched. Even though he's illegitimate, he still has blood to the head. So that's the point? This is becoming quite interesting. A moment later, he disappeared. When Zik found himself near a certain house with his belongings, he asked if anyone was here. 3 level 4s, 1 level 5, experienced fighters. What do such people need? He heard conversation outside the door, someone discussing how there were no rifts nearby, so there was probably little chaos. The air is indeed cleaner in the provinces, Captain. They don't seem to be hostile in any way. At least, it doesn't look like an assassination attempt. In that case, he opened the doors and asked what business they had in such a place. The captain and his subordinate turned and looked at him in horror. He had the El Dragon emblem. They abruptly lined up and announced that this was their first meeting, and they had come to escort Master Zik. He was to come for an inspection. When Zik realized this, he got scared and screamed, because he hadn't been taught anything. He didn't think he'd be returned to the main location after 1,700 years. Zik found himself in a school uniform and approached the castle itself. Afterwards, he was delivered to the main family by messengers from the main house. He needed to change clothes and couldn't enter the grounds like this. But this wasn't for living in the main house. The Dragon's Nest. It seemed the Elder Dragon clan had created a special educational institution 1,000 years ago. Everyone born into the clan strives to enter this Dragon's Nest and be educated by their families until the age of 7. Today, that very entrance exam was being held, but he hadn't been taught anything at all. Everyone is required to take the exam, so he was brought here all the way from the outskirts. But he didn't understand why now, when he was about to leave, after all the preparations. At that moment, he became upset and crouched down, when suddenly a guy named Ranjis from the Ordskal village approached him and offered him his hand. He asked if he was okay. He seemed confused. The protagonist asked again, "Who is he?" Ranjis stated his name and said, he looked like he was in trouble, so he approached. He was surprised and realized that this guy looked timid, but quite perceptive. Ranjis didn't know what else to say, and Zik stood up, apologized, and told him his name. He just doesn't understand what exactly they want from them. Ranjis replied that the tests themselves don't change every year, and Zik replied, "I don't know what to do at all." Ranjis realized this guy had zero training and exclaimed, "What? Not knowing about the test is too reckless. Will he even survive?" He replied that it was today's test, but before he could finish, a grown man shouted at him, "Weakling Ranjis." He turned around and saw his old acquaintance, who asked him what he was doing here. Weakling. Was he lost or something? Let him go home before he got hurt. Ranjis was frightened by him and replied that it was, of course, for the dragon nest exams, which caused Retin to scream. Him? He could never get in here. His father was a pseudo-dragon, wasn't he? What can the children of a pseudo-dragon do? Ranjis's hand shook, and the protagonist noticed. Elder dragons have a clear hierarchy, established by the absolute monarch. Rookie dragons, ordinary dragon soldiers and captains, adult dragons, and the leaders, the elder dragons or elders. And at the very bottom are the pseudo-dragons, those who couldn't get into the dragon nest or didn't complete it. They are called that because they have a direct meaning, immature, but he wants to prove they're fake. Zik decided to get involved in this squabble and asked, "Why is this so? How can he claim this without even letting him try?" Retin asked again, "Who the hell was he? Did he have any beef with him?" Zik replied no, he was simply asking why it was impossible for Ranjis. Retin pointed at him and shouted that it was because he was weak, and that was obvious. Ranjis was surprised, and the protagonist said that he might be stronger than them all. When Ranjis saw his reflection, he was horrified, and Retin started screaming, "What did he just say? He's claiming they're beneath this weakling?" At that moment, an examiner, an adult dragon, approached them and announced, "Attention! The entrance exam to the dragon nest is beginning. Applicants must register in order and proceed quickly with their number tags." Retin angrily walked past Zik and said he remembered his face. "You bastard," Zik replied. There was no need to get so angry. Young people are very hot-tempered these days. Ranjis asked again, "They're the same age, right? And anyone would be angry if they heard he was stronger." Zik asked again, "Is that so? It's a mandatory entrance exam, right? So people say it's impossible or something else." Ranjis asked again, "Can't he refuse? He really doesn't know anything." Zik was surprised. Can he refuse? He didn't know that. Ranjis said he'd better refuse, at least he won't get hurt. Zik replied that someone with his skill level couldn't refuse even if they tried, and Ranjis responded by expressing his confidence, even though he didn't know the test's contents. MC exclaimed that it didn't matter, they needed to go and hurry, or the exam would begin. Ranjis didn't know what to say. And at that moment, the examiner announced that the test was easy. If they could leave a scratch on this stone, they'd passed. They were forbidden from using any weapons except the ones they had prepared, but they could try with their bare hands, as long as they left a scratch. However, they only had 3 tries. The protagonist remarked on how unexpectedly easy the test was. Ranjis was very surprised and shouted, "What?" He answered, "But you just need to leave a scratch on this stone, right?" After such a crazy ritual as the dragon trials, he thought something terrible was in store for them. At that moment, the examiner announced that they were beginning the task. And a moment later, one of the boys struck the stone with incredible force, and Ranjis clutched his head from the terrible roar. Splashes of blood flew everywhere, and those around him were dumbfounded. The boy fell to the ground, but nothing had happened, and his first attempt had failed. He only had 2 left. Would he try again? The examiner said they could read the test as failed and continue. The next one could take a step forward. Ranjis was frightened and still couldn't recover, and Zik didn't understand what was wrong with him. And what kind of test was this anyway? Ranjis replied that it was called a regeneration stone. It instantly repaired minor scratches. Moreover, when attacked with brute force, it had the property of reflecting it with 100-fold force. The protagonist asked if this wasn't a rather inappropriate material. Ranjis replied that if you properly channel the source energy through your body and attack, it will scratch. Zik thought about it, clearly. Judging by the quality of his martial arts training, it seemed less important than controlling the source energy. He grinned and realized that it looked like many would pass this test, and those guys would do so in the morning too. A moment later, number 51 failed, and the next one too as expected. Everyone failed this exam, and the next number was 315. Zik realized it was his turn, and Ranjis asked again. Perhaps it wasn't too late for him to withdraw. He tossed the card aside and told him not to worry, then immediately walked out onto the field. The examiner looked at him in surprise and said to take a weapon from that collection, but suddenly he saw Zik and his incredible strength, causing him to freeze and widen his eyes in shock. The examiner asked the protagonist if he would use a weapon. Zik replied yes, he wouldn't. His fist would be enough. The people around him were shocked by what he'd heard and began whispering, "Is this guy really going to hit with bare hands?" Even if he skillfully manipulated his inner strength, he wouldn't be able to leave a single scratch with his bare hands. His fist would shatter. No, let them forget about his fist. His entire arm would fly off. He thought everything was happening as expected. He had to stop him. Maybe it wasn't too late? He was shaking with fear, and the examiner said everything was clear, then let him begin. Zik thought about it. This mineral, which he was seeing for the first time, must have appeared only millennia ago. There were so many things he didn't understand. Well, it didn't matter. He needed to act. He swung his fire fist when suddenly Ranjus began shouting that this wouldn't work, and that he had to stop him. He shouted his name, but Zik was only thinking about how this would help him overcome all his current strength. He used the Dragon Destruction martial art, Form 1, and struck the stone with an explosive strike, shattering it into tiny pieces. A moment later, there was an incredible explosion, and everyone exclaimed, "Wow!" The examiner himself was shocked, his eyes wide in amazement. Zik simply smiled and realized that this technique was still difficult for him in his current body. The stone was shattered, and his hand was slightly bruised, but he understood that he needed a little more practice. All the surrounding boys' mouths dropped open in shock, as no one expected such an outcome. Retin was angry that he'd broken the stone and sneered at him. One of the girls was overjoyed, saying it was interesting. Ranjus turned blue in horror and didn't know how to react. He exclaimed, "What?" Zik continued to smile, and the examiner wondered, can't he just break the regeneration stone like that? That's only possible at the 4-star level or higher, and such a child could do it? Even though he was illegitimate, he truly had the blood of the family head, but he'd seen the technique he used somewhere before. At that moment, Zik apologized to the examiner and asked what the results of his test were. He exclaimed sharply, "Number 315 passed the exam." He approached the assistant, who handed him the potion with a smile on his face. Zik asked again, "What is it?" The boy asked if he could hurry up and clear the area. Zik was surprised. Was everyone in this era really so strange and caustic? Let them at least be a little more kind. When he sat down next to his new friend, Ranjus grabbed his hand and shouted that it was amazing because he'd broken the stone. He replied that it was easy, then showed Ranjus the potion and asked what it was. He replied that it was a healing potion. A very ordinary healing potion. Zik stared at it and thought, it doesn't look like poison. Could it really be a spiritual medicine? And then there's the nebula from the Tree of Clarity, a medicine created using extremely rare materials. Among the ingredients are medicinal herbs that grow only in secret realms. There are also cores imbued with the power of high-frequency source, from divine beasts and phantom beasts that are difficult to even encounter. When consumed, it instantly heals not only wounds, but even old scars, and exhibits the effect of increasing the source's power. However, due to the extreme difficulty of obtaining the materials, it's incredibly difficult to prepare and rarely appears in the world. When the protagonist drank the potion, he examined his body, which glowed with magical colors. He exclaimed that it truly was a spiritual medicine. Ranjus replied that he didn't know anything about spiritual medicines, but the healing potion prepared by the ancient dragon family was definitely better than store-bought ones. Was that so surprising? Zik replied, of course it was. Such serious injuries healed instantly. This was true, because it didn't seem like the source's power increased like the spiritual medicine from Ranjus's perspective. Zik was more impressive. Zik asked him not to be ridiculous, and he thought, no, this is truly the wisdom accumulated by humanity over 1,000 years. He truly was magnificent and incredibly strong. Zik replied that he wanted to become the strongest, and Ranjus remarked that he was speaking so calmly. At that moment, number 383, who had also passed the exam, entered the arena. It was Retin. The remaining guys, number 395 and number 405, passed. Ranjus shook and thought their success was expected. Next number was 414. Right now, it was Ranjus's turn. He jumped up from his seat and, trembling, announced that it was his turn and he was leaving. Zik asked why he was so nervous. He shouldn't have a problem with this. Let him pull himself together. Ranjus, almost in tears, turned to him and shouted at him not to raise his standards so high. Zik looked at him questioningly, not understanding what this guy was doing. Ranjus grabbed his sword, squeezed it sharply, and decided to act. He screamed loudly and struck the stone, but immediately fell to the ground. The examiner announced that the first attempt had been failed, and 2 remained. He replied, "One more time. This time it will definitely work." A moment later, he struck the stone with his sword again, but flew off to the side. He tried to catch his breath, muttering that this couldn't be happening. The guy started laughing at him, because as expected, the child of a pseudo-dragon would remain a pseudo-dragon. He should give up. Retin asked Zik what he said earlier. Hadn't he said that Ranjus, lying there, was stronger than them? Zik got angry and told them to stop talking such nonsense. It was truly ridiculous. The examiner replied that he had 1 try left. Would he keep trying? Ranjus looked at him fearfully, and at that moment Zik approached him and asked what he was doing. He turned to him hopefully, and Zik asked again why he took a sword and why he didn't use a spear. Ranjus asked again in a trembling voice, "A spear? What did he mean?" He replied that that was exactly what he said. Why would he take an inappropriate weapon without any plan? In his current state, no matter how hard he tried, he wouldn't leave a scratch with the sword. At that moment, Retin started screaming. That guy's father doesn't use a spear. He taught him swordsmanship. The boys began to whisper that it was true, and that changing weapons wouldn't help him. Zik turned to the examiner and asked if changing weapons during the test was a violation of the rules. He replied that there would be no problem and asked again, "Did he hear that, Ranjus?" He was very lucky. So, should he try it or leave it as is? Ranjus thought for a moment and stood up, saying no, he would try using a spear. His father hadn't been able to enter the dragon's lair, They had called him a false dragon and laughed at him, but even then he hadn't become embittered and had raised him. And he, a son raised by his father, was no fake either. Today, he was here to prove it. He grabbed the spear and thought that if he attacked with the sword again, the result would be the same, and then he would trust Zik. But how should he use the spear? Ranjis pointed to the side and shouted, "Strike straight." He should do it without thinking, just attack straight away. Ranjis was surprised, so suddenly, logically, a simple strike with a spear he hadn't even held shouldn't have been able to leave a scratch on the regeneration stone. But how could he know if he hadn't even tried? They had only met today, but it might sound strange, but he understood it and would try. And since Zik believed in him, he would try to believe in himself too. He aimed the spear at the stone and thought that never before had he held a sword had so much power flowed through him as now. A moment later, he struck the stone with incredible force and cried out. Retin immediately rose from his seat and began screaming. Everyone saw. He told him so. Even changing weapons would never help him. Ranjis realized he felt as if the stone had become a part of him. The stone began to crumble into small pieces, and the guys exclaimed, "What does this mean?" The examiners were also surprised. Wow. He hadn't just scratched it, he had pierced it completely. Zik replied that it was magnificent, and he had done an excellent job. Ranjis expected this outcome and asked again, "What did he just do?" The examiner announced that number 4 and 14 had passed the test. He was very surprised, and when Zik hugged him, he said everything was correct and he had done as expected. Ranjis, with tears in his eyes, began shouting that he had done it and that he had indeed passed. He hugged his new friend with embarrassment, and Zik replied that that was what he was trying to say. The boys, dissatisfied, shouted that it was just an accident. They turned to Retin and asked, "Is that so?" The examiner shouted that the exam was over and the entrance ceremony was beginning. Zik wondered what the entrance ceremony meant. Was that the entire exam? Ranjis replied yes, perhaps there would be other tests after entrance. But what should they do now? Ranjis replied that it wasn't a question of what to do, and at that moment the examiners came out and announced that the leadership of the ancient dragon family would give congratulatory speeches. When the protagonist saw the leader, he asked who the sullen man was. Ranjis was surprised by what he'd just said. After all, he was the head of the family. Zik asked again, "He's the head? Why was he looking like that? Couldn't he be more cheerful? Even ice would be warmer than him." Ranjis shut him up and asked him to please be quiet. He continued to plead, and Zik thought, so this is how powerful the current line of ancient dragons is. Several are at the 7-star level, a fair number at the 6-star level. That's impressive power. And this is the current head, Balza, a dragon at the 8-star level. The level of 8 stars 1,000 years ago, in the entire world, there weren't even a dozen of them. He doesn't know what happened to this era, but he doesn't like it. And it turns out it's his father. At that moment, one of his subordinates shouted, "A word from Master Balza. Attention!" He stood in the middle of the field and told everyone to strive to become the flesh and blood of the El Dragon family. He glared at the protagonist, after which his magical powers scattered throughout the hall. Ranjis couldn't breathe from this horror, and Zik turned to him and asked, "What happened?" Even the other children are succumbing to his pressure? Such immense hatred. He doesn't know what happened, but he really doesn't like him. When Balza turned around, one of his subordinates began clapping his hands and shouting that these were wonderful words. Master Balza has great hopes for them. The protagonist wondered, who is this? Then he would leave the boring greetings to the others and wouldn't say much. They should strive to live up to them, youngsters. Another examiner approached him and said, "What an expression on your face. Seriously, you can go bald from too much stress." Zik didn't understand, but fortunately the atmosphere changed. All the children were perplexed and exchanged silent glances. At that moment, the examiner shouted that they would now announce the dorm assignments and that anyone named was asked to come quickly. Zik asked, "Won't they all go to the same place?" Ranjis replied, "Yes, there are 4 dragon lairs. Students admitted to admission are assigned to the East, South, and North halls, respectively." Zik replied that everything was clear, and at that moment someone called out number 3115. He stood up and asked Ranjis to take care of himself. He smiled and replied, yes, he should take care of himself too. Sometime later, in the dragon lair in the East Hall, Zik scratched his head and said that after 1,000 years, something had changed here. Should he turn here? That's just what he needed. Oh my god, he was lost and late. His neighbor was probably already inside. He opened the door and apologized for the wait. From today on, they would be sharing a room. When he saw who stood before him, he froze. He was very surprised to see Ranjis standing there, looking out the window. He didn't know why, but fate kept crossing paths with him. Ranjis turned around and rejoiced, saying something like, "It seems so." He was a bit scared on his own, so it's good he's here. Zik asked, "Does he have anything else to do today?" Ranjis replied, "No, training starts right away tomorrow." Ranjis asked again, suspecting he hadn't even been listening, right? The teacher had spoken, but before he could finish, Zik shouted that he hadn't heard a word. He replied that it was definitely nothing to brag about. In short, he'd better go to bed early because training would start tomorrow morning. Zik was upset, considering fleeing this boring house and setting out on a journey. But there was the rebirth stone, and the entrance exam was full of riddles. He wanted to find out what had changed in 1,000 years, and he'd remain in the El Dragon house, and perhaps that wasn't so bad. A month passed, and the boys, who had been training furiously with tears in their eyes, were training. The trainer shouted for them to listen carefully. The dragon breathing technique he was teaching them was created by the 15th head of the dragon clan himself. It was the greatest of all breathing techniques. They must master it so they could use it flawlessly in any situation. Ranjis was barely able to withstand the strain, and when the examiner looked at one of the girls, he thought someone had already mastered the dragon breathing, especially Laika. She was already showing a slight hint of true energy, a sign that she was approaching the 2nd star level. When the examiner turned his attention to Zik, he didn't understand what was wrong with him. Besides his usual weight, he also added several stones to his head and arms. He, too, is of the blood of the clan's head, but he had no mentors and nowhere to study. So how could he see such a strange sight? His breathing technique, the dragon breath, had been modified and now spread as the dragon breath. The breathing technique is a way to inhale true energy from the air and channel it through the body, amplifying one's own strength. Its effectiveness depends on the skill and ingenuity of the practitioner, so great families developed their own methods and guarded them as secret heirlooms. Dragon breath is indeed safe and easy to master, but if it only works at rest, then he doesn't need it at all. The secret technique of the Gilfas El Dragon clan, the Dragon King's breath, is a unique breathing technique that allows one to manipulate energy without interruption, even while moving. The effect is colossal, but due to its complexity, few have been able to master it. To make it accessible to everyone and increase the clan's overall combat ability, the technique was simplified, and thus its technique was transformed and passed down. He wondered if other arts had changed over the past 1,000 years. He was eagerly awaiting to find out. When Laika noticed him, she looked at him silently and said nothing. After a while, the guys gathered for lunch in the cafeteria, and after they finished eating, they were too tired to move. But Zik continued eating and didn't stop. He turned to Ranjis and asked why he was so sad. If he didn't eat, he wouldn't have the strength. Ranjis couldn't understand where he got so much energy. He had some kind of abnormal stamina. He replied that they lacked stamina. They needed to eat more and train. Ranjis replied that there was no need, he would eat his own. When Zik turned to Redden, he thought that some of them really were already pretty trained. At that moment, Laika approached him, greeted him, and said that he really was cool, wasn't he? He asked, "Who the hell is that?" Ranjis was dumbfounded and began whispering to him. "Doesn't he know her? She's the daughter of the current clan head, Lady Laika." He replied that he didn't know her, and Ranjis shouted that that couldn't be true. She was one of the candidates for the future clan head. In fact, they didn't even have the right to address her. Zik replied that if it came down to it, he was also the clan head's son, albeit an illegitimate one. Ranjis asked again, "What?" At that moment Laika asked again, "Is that true? He was the head's bastard?" She was one of the heirs, and Zik asked, "What's the point in lying about that?" Laika asked, "Then why was he so strong that he could split the rebirth stone with his bare hands? How could he, a mere bastard, do such a thing without a patron?" He replied that it was because he was the one. Ranjis didn't understand what had happened, and Laika remained completely unnoticed, after which she smiled and said that he really was funny. "How about becoming her leader?" He asked again, "What does that mean?" Laika offered him the chance to become her vassal, and she would protect him. Since he's a bastard, he definitely needs allies, right? So let him help her become the head of the clan, use his power to achieve that, and of course, when she becomes head, reward him generously. How does that sound to him? He immediately answered, "No." Laika asked again, "But why? Was he really planning to do that too, and aiming for the head's place?" Zik thought about it. She'd almost reached the 2-star level. Could she release her aura? At her age, it was certainly interesting, but let her do it herself. He wasn't interested in being the head of the clan or the title. Laika started screaming, "What's going on?" "Well, then there's nothing wrong with that." He got angry and slammed his knife on the table, then said he wouldn't become anyone's subordinate. It's all because he himself is the strongest. Laika was frightened by his aura and asked again, "What? Did he really crush her?" At that moment, Ranjis asked them to calm down in a trembling voice, and she screamed that she would simply force him to submit and fight her. The protagonist looked at her silently while chewing his food, then asked, "What?" When the boys went out into the hallway, one of the students asked another where he was going. He replied that he was going to the training grounds. People were saying that the younger students had arranged a duel and were fighting Lady Laika. He asked again, "Laika from the Chupon house? But why and with whom?" He replied that he didn't know, and all the boys rushed to watch the proceedings. When Laika appeared in front of the protagonist, who scratched his head in bewilderment, silence fell between them. The boys were whispering among themselves, saying there would be a battle. But who was it? Zik replied that it looked like everything had turned into a real brawl, and Ranjis asked him to listen, and asked if it was really safe. After all, his opponent would be Lady Laika herself. Zik replied that even if he said it was Laika herself, he still didn't know who she was. And by the way, why did he suddenly switch to the informal you? Ranjis shouted. "Of course he is, after all, the son of the clan head." Zik replied that he could do as he pleased, and Ranjis shouted that that wasn't the issue right now. He should think again. After all, Lady Laika is the daughter of the current head of the Balza clan, and, moreover, a bloodline of House Tupong, one of the 4 great houses supporting the El Dragon clan. Like the other Balza children, Lady Laika possesses incredible talent. By the age of 7, she had mastered all forms of the legendary thunder art for the Tulip Sword, handed down in the House of Tulip. Zik apologized, but he didn't really understand. Ranjis asked why. He replied that it was because he'd never heard of it, that's all. Ranjis clutched his head, unable to understand why, and Zik asked, "What's in it for him?" He replied that since he didn't know, it would be all the more interesting. He was simply breathtaking. Ranjis started screaming, "What's this? Even if he's strong, he's hopeless against Laika. Why did he even agree to this challenge?" He replied that if he was challenged, he wouldn't run from a duel, and besides, she seemed ready for battle. Laika raised her sword and asked, "Are they done with their useless talk?" Ranjis was stressed when she asked this question. He was confused and didn't know what to say, but Zik simply smiled and said he'd told him he was fully prepared. Ranjis fled the battlefield and told him to be careful. Zik replied that he should be careful. Didn't he think everything depended on her? And why was she even attacking him? Laika replied that she would become the head, or that she needed to make him her vassal by subjugating him. He asked again, "What? Why did he even care?" Laika asked again, "Does he know anything about his lineage? Is it because he's a bastard?" He replied, "No, he knows." But Laika drew his attention to herself and said, "Does he understand? Among the children of the contenders for the next head of the line, there are 5, including him and her. All but him come from the 4 great houses that make up the El Dragon line. It's very important which of the 4 houses will become the next head. So here in this dragon's nest, they fight representing their houses. To resist their older brothers, she needs more power." He was surprised. So 4 houses are fighting for the headship? It's so complicated it's hard to understand. But he replied that everything is clear, and Laika said that, be that as it may, as a contender for the next head of the family, she needs to strengthen her position, so she jumped sharply to the side and shouted that she would beat him right then and there. She swung her sword at him with incredible force and slammed it into the ground, but Zik easily dodged it. She continued to attack him, but he either turned away from her attacks with incredible speed or shouted that she wouldn't let him escape. The guys watching this fight shouted how fast she was. Even though it was just a training leash, she had such a huge sword and she wielded it so easily. Laika approached Zik again, and the guys whispered among themselves that her control of true energy was impeccable, and she was attacking faster and faster. So that's what they are like, the children of the heads of the 4 great houses. Her victory is only a matter of time. Laika was angry and clenched her teeth, screaming, "Why?" She couldn't understand why she couldn't catch up with him and destroy him. Zik just laughed and said everything was clear. She continued to wonder why she wasn't hitting him, and Ranjis was surprised. Wow. Zik replied that, as he thought, he was seeing this fighting style for the first time, and at this speed, she wouldn't be able to tell she was just a 1-star student. Laika yelled at him to shut up and focus on the fight. The protagonist yelled that of course he was focused, and that's why he could attack her like that. He grabbed her with his fist, punched her right in the chest, and dragged her along. She coughed from the pain and horror she felt and fell to her knees. The boys were surprised. No way. Laika herself had fallen after his blow. What kind of guy was this? Laika got angry and asked why her attacks weren't hitting him. She should be much faster than any ordinary 1-star fighter. He replied that everything was correct and much more agile than all the 1-star fighters he'd seen, but she was still only a 1-star fighter. She screamed, just like him. He wouldn't be able to follow her movements there. Zik replied that it was as simple as pie: breathing, gaze, muscle movement. After observing all this, her next steps would become clear to them. But he also had experience. Laika asked again, what kind of nonsense was he talking about? She tried to strike him with her sword again, but he dodged and replied, he already said he sees everything. Laika didn't give up trying and continued to rush from side to somehow touch him, but she didn't succeed. Finally, Zik punched her so hard that she hit the ground and froze, and the guys started shouting at her, "Laika, this can't be true. Did she really lose?" Ranjis shouted, "Zik, he's so cool. Defeating Laika herself is amazing." He replied, "No, they're not finished yet." Laika stood up, and Zik asked if she'd really concentrated her true energy in her stomach and withstood his attack. He was getting really curious. Laika was groaning in pain, covered in blood, and Ranjis told him to stop because he shouldn't be doing this. Zik replied that he should stay away from these guys because if he got hit, he shouldn't complain. At that moment, he spoke up, but he'd already guessed that she'd reached the 2-star rank. She stood up, and all the guys understood what it meant. Without a doubt, the white aura is a sign of the 2-star rank. 2-star is a state where the true energy within the body is channeled into a weapon and shaped to be ideal for martial arts. People call the released true energy an aura. She thanked him for this, and said that thanks to him, she was able to reach the 2-star rank, and now he no longer had a chance. Laika swung at Zik, and he smiled and said how fast she was. He dodged her attack again and said, "Wow." It turned out Laika had managed to hit him and his cheek was cut. He was surprised. "What's going on? He definitely dodged it, right?" Laika asked again. "So how does he like this?" "These are her abilities. Now that she has reached the 2-star rank and mastered the aura, she will be able to defeat him. He asked again, really? He will be able to look at the art unknown to him. It is simply magnificent. The art of the great lightning sword, a flash of thunder lightning, they used all of it in this fight. When Laika pounced on him with these powers, the protagonist screamed, wait, what the hell is this? What does it mean to control lightning? This is complete nonsense. Laika screamed, and yet he actually looks like he is enjoying it. She slammed the ground so hard that the protagonist jumped aside. The heavenly network is wide. There's no escaping justice with a less pretentious option. Zik shouted that he'd changed too much compared to a minute ago. This lightning would be hard for him to handle. At that moment, the guys were discussing what kind of battle this was. Is it really possible to change so much thanks to a new star? Ranjis exclaimed, damn it, Zik. He was worried about him. Meanwhile, Zik reflected on how terribly simple the movements were, no different from the previous ones. Having received the 2nd star and her great lightning sword art, she immediately soared into the sky. He'd previously thought it was fast, but now it had become even faster. And what amazed him most was this lightning. Enveloping himself in lightning like this would have been impossible 1,000 years ago. He could have struck back right now, but now he was terribly curious about this power. Laika shouted that he was laughing in this state. It seemed all too easy for him. In that case, she would make it so he couldn't laugh. She grew angry and, swinging at him with incredible force, leaped off the ground and shouted the spell, Swift Thunder Strike. Her sword flew past Zik again, and he remarked that it was like a flash of lightning. A moment later, there was a bright explosion, and Ranjis screamed in fear, Zik. He jumped from the balcony and ran toward him, but Zik rose under attack, and Laika used the flash of thunder lightning again. When she struck the ground, Zik tried to climb out of the rocks, and Ranjis shouted, Laika, let her stop the attack. He's asking her if she continues. But before she could finish, Laika asked why. He was still standing. Didn't he understand that if she stopped now, it would be an insult to him? Ranjis continued shouting, please surrender, and Laika said that, frankly, she thought he was right. He was already completely exhausted and on his last breath. So, if he surrenders and acknowledges her as his mistress, then he becomes her right now. Zik smiled silently and said nothing. Laika continued, I see, even if he is a bastard, he has the pride of a dragon, right? That's wonderful, she continued. Then she'll deal him a finishing blow with all her might. At that moment, she swung her sword and shouted, Great lightning sword art, first secret technique, heavenly thunder. A bright beam of light struck Zik directly, who was stunned and began to scream in pain. Ranjis shouted his name and reached out to him, and a moment later, he was obliterated. Laika thrust her sword into the ground and apologized for ending the duel. After a while, everything became clear, but suddenly a bright flash of light appeared behind her. When she turned around, she asked why he was able to stand up to the thunder from heaven. Zik chuckled and replied that this was called lightning energy. She then asked why. He didn't know either. When he said this, Laika was dumbfounded, and Zik explained that he'd been deliberately taking her blows to test her strength, and now, for some unknown reason, he'd learned it too. She asked again, what do you mean, learned? How was that even possible? Zik reflected on the fact that while he'd been taking her incomprehensible, lightning-fast blows, he'd been using the dragon breathing technique the entire time. And what had happened? Her lightning energy responded to the Dragon King's breathing, and somehow the lightning began to accumulate within him. And when he came to his senses, he could already control it, although he still hadn't fully understood the principle. It turns out this is a special property of his body. Considering that this is the great art of the sword, their ancestral heritage, then please let him consider her family's special physical properties. Who would have thought their true energy was pierced by lightning? He'd learned a lot, and more importantly, thanks to it, he was able to obtain a 2nd star. He said that now the duel would be evenly matched, and it wasn't over yet. He smiled and swung his hand at her, and a moment later, an explosion occurred right on the battlefield. He jumped aside and realized, but when true energy acquires the properties of lightning, it affects all the muscles and nerves, strengthening the body. This is an incredible feature of the body, and it even distorts the senses. Maybe he should get used to it a little. A battle between contenders for the next head of the clan, and he can barely keep track of them with his eyes. Maybe he imagined it, but even Laika's lightning-fast sword strikes stopped landing. Laika screamed. Was he mocking her? Zik replied with a smile that he wasn't mocking her at all. He perceived her as a threat. At that moment, he hunched over and stood several meters in front of her. When Laika landed, Zik asked, well, maybe that's enough? Perhaps it was time to finish. Maybe he should create a new technique for fun? She asked again. Technique? He answered yes, his first form. No, perhaps she called it a special form. Laika considered this. So he had been secretly trained in martial arts, but in which house? Or wait, was he inventing new techniques himself? Was it really that easy to create? She didn't understand anything at all. He asked again. Was she thinking about something? He had distracted her and drawn her attention to him. Laika exclaimed that when she realized he was already very close, she used her dragon fighting art, a special technique. At that moment, the protagonist created lightning and struck her right in the chest. Laika fell to her knees, that smoke emanating from her body. The protagonist announced that the duel was over. It had truly been an exciting battle. Laika fell exhausted to the floor and couldn't move for some time. When she rose slightly, trembling, She said that this couldn't be true. Had she really lost? She clenched her teeth in anger and said that even though she was supposed to be the head, she had to defeat her older brothers and become the head of the clan. She couldn't lose to him. He talked her down, but wow, it was simply magnificent. She was so strong. She was surprised. And Zik said that he really did find learning new things really fun, and that it had been an extremely useful pastime. If it ended there, it would be so boring. He offered her his hand and invited her to fight again. Laika, she was embarrassed and didn't know what to say. He was already looking forward to their next battle. Laika said she was no match for him, and shook his hand, because she had completely lost. A few hours later, terrifying monsters formed inside the rift. The head of the family himself appeared among them, looked at them terribly, and, using his powers, said, "Dragon power." When he cast the spell, he added the art of first form dragon slaying, Genesis. A moment later, he swung his sword once, destroying all his opponents at once, and looked around. A subordinate approached him and reported what had happened. Balza asked again, "What happened?" The subordinate reported that Laika had received a second star. He stopped and asked, "So what?" The subordinate replied that a 2-star rank at her age was remarkable, and with Laika's talent, she could possibly reach 4 or even 5 stars by the time she completed her training at the nest. Balza replied that he didn't care about her talent. Let her talk about it when it was ready to be used. If he had come to engage in idle chatter, he should disappear from his sight now. The subordinate remarked that Laika had herself been defeated, and this greatly intrigued Balza, who turned around and asked, "Did she fight her older brothers?" He replied, "No, his son, Zik, who was the same age as her, had defeated her." He was surprised that it was that woman's child. She seemed to have a talent for martial arts, but by the time the boy was born, she was already dead, wasn't she? Who taught him a technique capable of defeating someone with 2 stars? The subordinate explained that Zik had defeated Lake without training, and yet had earned 2 stars on his own. He was surprised and realized that in that case, the first tests could begin. The subordinate said, "With all due respect, isn't it too early?" It hadn't even been a month since they officially began studying. Balza asked again, "So what?" Whether he had trained in combat or not, death comes to everyone equally. Only the strongest survive. And whether she had a star or not was irrelevant. Those who couldn't survive the first battle would have a place in the House of El Dragon. The subordinate replied that he was absolutely right, and Balza asked to summon Freya back. He was surprised. Freya? Balza said yes. The fact that he was able to defeat Laika himself was truly interesting, so he should entrust Freya with command and supervision of their upbringing, and let her keep an eye on them. He replied that he obeyed him, and Balza was surprised. So Zik? That would be interesting. The next day, the guys trained on the court, and Ranjus was also working hard, dripping with sweat. The protagonist wondered, technique for fighting a furious dragon? On today's list, he had a double weight, 1 large stone, 2 medium stones, and squats without support. Breathing techniques, they say. This method is similar to dragon breathing. It's called a combat technique, but essentially, it's strengthening the body. Everything is so well thought out that even children can easily master it. Ranjus asked, "Is Zik not going to train?" He asked again, "What is he even talking about? He was already doing it, so let him see." Ranjus replied, "No. He wasn't talking about physical training, but about practicing techniques for fighting a furious dragon." He replied that he had already mastered it, and Ranjus exclaimed, "What? They just explained it to him." He replied that it was easy. By the way, Ranjus, his true source path is crooked, and he was surprised. Zik stood up and placed the stone on the ground, then told him to turn around and pointed to his back. At that moment, when he pressed the right spot in his body, lightning-fast beams of light appeared, and Ranjus felt something incredible. Zik said that now everything was on track, and Ranjus thanked him for this, looking at his hands. He turned around and said, "Wow, he really has mastered everything." Zik asked again, what was he doubting him for? Ranjus replied that he was apologizing because that's not what he meant. This was his first time learning from someone other than his father, so he was trying his best. But he already possessed a powerful martial art, enough to defeat Laika, so he thought that fighting a furious dragon would be too boring for him. Zik replied that nothing of the sort was true. He admired the consistency of his technique for fighting the furious dragon. After all, his anti-dragon combat technique was considered too complex and confusing among his sons. Anti-dragon combat is a complex and intricate combat technique, but it possesses overwhelming power. This style begins with the first form, then the second, third, and fourth forms. In addition to the special form born during the battle with Laika, there is a final form that buried the divine dragon itself under its overwhelming destructive power. He is intrigued by the dragon's techniques. Perhaps they have been improved, and he is eager to learn about it. Regardless, he has already fully mastered the technique for fighting the furious dragon, so he continues to seal his body as before. Everyone learns at different speeds, and Ranjus replied that everything is clear, when suddenly Ranjus began shouting, "Zik, will you temper him too?" He wanted him to teach him. Zik was stunned, and Ranjus shouted that he knew it was an annoying request, but he wanted to become much stronger. Zik calmly replied, "Okay," and Ranjus asked again, "He'll help him, right?" Zik didn't understand the reaction. He'd asked for it, hadn't he? He wouldn't lie, and besides, teaching him was a pleasure. At that moment, Laika approached them and said that if that's the case, she wanted to learn from him too. She approached them sheepishly, and Ranjis asked again. Laika? She asked again, can't she? Did they want to hear the truth? She believed that no one among her peers could defeat her. After all, she was a contender for the next head. Then, somehow, he used lightning energy and even performed it better than her, and her reputation was ruined. Zik asked again, was it his fault? Ranjis didn't know what to say, and Laika shouted that she wanted to become stronger to defeat both her brothers and him, so she was asking him to train her too. He thought silently for a moment, after which Laika asked, can't she? As she thought, he was also a contender for the headship, and training a rival seemed strange to her. Ranjis thought about it. By the way, this man was also a contender for the headship. Even though he was a bastard, he was still the son of the current head of the clan. Zik grinned and replied, okay, but will her body handle it? She had injuries that would keep her from moving for at least a month, right? She replied that she had drunk a healing potion, so everything was fine. He was worried about something very strange. They whispered, and Zik said that this crazy potion, as before, was simply incredibly strong. Ranjis replied that if he was talking about that healing potion from the entrance exam, it wasn't that strong. He thought he was talking about Laika. She had used a real potion. He understood what incredible times they lived in. Without a healing potion, she wouldn't be able to move for a whole month. But right now, something else was more important. Would he really undertake to teach her? He probably needed a temporary recovery too. He smiled. Of course, how could he refuse a young man who was striving for development? She asked again. Isn't he young himself? Ranjis again replied. After all, they were the same age. He replied, well, yes, and then asked, are you sure about that? After all, he was the one who defeated her. Laika replied that she didn't care, that she had no time to think about feigned pride. She would do anything to become stronger and lead the clan. Zik replied that last time she picked on him, she also talked about the clan head, right? But why was she so obsessed with the position of head? She thought for a moment and replied that if she didn't take the position, her only option would be marriage. A political marriage, as they call it. At best, she'd have to marry some cousin, and at worst, a stranger. He asked again what she'd said. She replied that, of course, an even line of Eldragon is of great importance, and especially the 4 great families, including hers. He knew they had a special true power, and it could be put to many uses. Zik replied, wow, people do all sorts of nasty things. Who do these bastards think they are? Such vile traditions. He'll destroy it all himself. When he shouted this, he was suddenly dumbfounded because the examiner approached them, and the guys felt ashamed. Laika asked what was going on. Zik replied, why is everything so untimely? At that moment, the examiner announced that a new mentor was joining them today. He had arrived despite his busy schedule, and they should be grateful for the honor. And this red-haired girl approached Laika and asked, is this Laika? Laika, frightened, turned to her and threw her aside. Ranjis hugged Zik out of fear, and the girl said it was a wonderful movement, and the quality of her aura was also beyond reproach. They thought she hadn't felt her presence at all, so who was she? The examiners said she was there, as expected, very fast. It was Freya. She belonged to the Black Dragon clan. Freya greeted everyone and said, hi, nice to meet you. And that was Zik. Zik replied that she'd hit the nail on the head, and she asked if he wasn't surprised. Zik replied that nothing was surprising, but she possessed a very interesting art, didn't she? Freya seemed thoughtful, and he became curious. A magnificent art of stealth, but he was more interested in the martial arts she'd mastered. Apparently, the flow of true power was concentrated in the lower part of the body. But what kind of flow was this? He'd never seen anything like it. Perhaps that's why, even in those boots, she didn't make a sound. He wondered what kind of martial art it was. He'd be pleased to know. Freya said that, as they'd all heard, she was now the new mentor, so she encouraged everyone to try their best. The guys were surprised that it was the same Freya from Gefu, and started whispering, wow. The examiner reported that Freya belonged to the Black Dragon clan and had a 6-star rank. They must study hard. The guys were discussing how the Black Dragon clan was directly subordinate to that very leader. So why did such a cool girl suddenly appear here? Was she really going to train them? Freya confirmed, of course, and the guys were very surprised. She said only if they could pass her tests. At that moment, they all panicked and clutched their heads, wondering how it all happened so suddenly. Freya replied that everything was fine and very easy. They needed to take this crystal ball and spend a month on Poison Dragon Mountain, that's all. The guys were scared. Poison Dragon Mountain? Zik realized that the name brought back memories. Poison Dragon Mountain is a place inhabited by many different poisonous creatures. Even a blade of grass touching your skin is enough to cause death for an ordinary person. But in his past life, he used it for training, and it's not particularly tasty. But isn't it a bit early for them? If this crystal ball breaks or gets lost during the test, everything will be bad. What will happen if they conduct tests? Freya replied that of course, they would be expelled in that case, but that was if they survived. As for the poison, if they used the dragon's breath breathing technique correctly, it could be dealt with. There would be no problem with the crystal ball if they didn't lose it. Laika started screaming, but master, there were monsters there. Freya was surprised by this question and said that they could be defeated and that was it. More likely, if they overcome them, they wouldn't be able to get food, and then they could survive there for a month, right? The guys were all scared and started shouting. How could this be? Could they be dealt with using the Furious Dragon technique? She shouted that there were still 5 days left until the test, so they shouldn't worry, they would have a test. In those 5 days, they would have to choose one of the basic combat weapons of the Dragon House and master it. If they had ways to fight monsters, it was easy, right? However, if they couldn't master it in the 5 days remaining until the test, then she couldn't help them in any way. Did they understand? The boys asked. If there's danger, she'll save them, right? Freya replied. What nonsense. This is Dragon's house, and the weak will be destroyed, leaving only the strongest to survive. If they can't win, what's the point of this place? That's obvious, right? If they can't pass such an easy test, they'll have to sleep on a poison bed next to a monster. The boys looked at each other in shock, and then he grew proud. Maybe this isn't the Dragon's house he knew? He doesn't understand what this is? Freya said that conversation was over. They'd be handing out textbooks on each weapon now, and they should come get the book on wishes and weapons. The boys discussed everything they were considering, and Ranjus didn't know what to choose. He should choose a spear, but he was really afraid of it. Zik said he used it in the entrance exam, right? Ranjus thanked him for this and said he would choose the book on the two-handed sword. Laika said that even if she mastered the art of the Great Lightning Sword, the basic form too, but before she could finish speaking, Zik told her to wait and that she should choose the art of wielding an axe. She looked at him questioningly and asked why. He replied that something she didn't yet know would help her now. Understood? Laika decided to trust him and said that if he said so, she would do it. Zik smiled, realizing he would choose the right one. After a while, Freya asked if everyone had received the books. Then, in the 5 days before the test, if they wanted to survive, they should try to study as if it were their last days. Otherwise, they would simply die without a fight. Also, during the test, the senior students from the East Wing would try to steal the crystal ball from them. He was frightened by this, but Zik was only surprised. Freya suggested that the 10th graders would be undergoing the tests at the same time. Their test was to take the crystal balls from them, but they shouldn't worry. There were more of them after all, and the territory of Poison Dragon Mountain was spacious enough that they wouldn't encounter any of them during the test. In any case, they wouldn't try to find them, so they should hold on. Ranjus clutched his head in fear and screamed. What should they do now? Not only monsters, but also upperclassmen will be hunting them. Laika said that the upperclassmen from the 10th year onwards are all top-ranked, 1 star, and even she might not be able to withstand a crowd attack, and the rest wouldn't be able to survive either. Zik picked up the book and said that was probably true, and Laika started yelling at him in anger. He replied that if one person can't handle it, they should just form teams of 2 or 3, right? Forming teams to face the upperclassmen isn't forbidden, right? Besides, to hunt on the island, you also need to form teams. Ranjus asked what he, Zik, would do. He replied that naturally, he would have fun alone. At that moment, Ranjus was very surprised by his choice of words, and Laika asked that no matter how strong he was, it was strange. Although, is he quite capable or not? He exclaimed that before training, they should first have a snack. Laika turned to Ranjus and said that he was a little strange, isn't he? He replied that sometimes that was true. 5 days later, all the guys gathered in the forest, and Ranjus fearfully announced that it was all beginning. Everyone was worried about their future, and it was the perfect weather for the test. Freya asked, so are they starting then? Ranjus whispered in Laika's ear that it was time for the test, and she confirmed it. Although Zik said so, could someone like him really go with her, Laika? After all, there were other scions of real noble houses in this class, and he was just an ordinary person, and he didn't have a star yet. He was simply useless. The guys behind him said they were the same as Ranjus. He blushed and saw his friends Selena and Raymond. Selena, embarrassed, said that she also couldn't believe her luck. Could such a simple girl like her really go with Laika herself? Raymond stood silently nearby, smiling at her. Laika said that everything was fine, and it didn't matter whether they were from common or noble families. She chose them because she saw their potential. At that moment, Ranjus let out a loud cry, clutching the spear in his hands and shouting that he would do his best to avoid becoming a burden. Raymond replied that he would try to live up to her expectations, and Laika said she had hope for them, then turned to the protagonist and asked if he was really going alone. Zik. The protagonist replied, of course, it's so interesting. I can't wait to get started. The guys were very nervous about this, and he sensed that this was the essence of a true leader. Laika shouted that she was also nervous, by the way. Zik asked if she had any reason to worry, including Laika. Only the most promising guys gathered here, right? Laika asked if he thought the same about them. Zik replied yes. She had masterfully assembled only the most promising guys from this class. It seems she has a sure instinct for people. They're an excellent choice in both attack and defense. Their trials will be easy. Ranjus spoke, as always, brimming with confidence, right? Freya asked if everyone was gathered. They decided to form teams and work together. They'd all be able to master combat weapon techniques, so that's a pretty good choice. So she suggests we begin. Each of them received a crystal ball, right? Their test is to spend a month on Poison Dragon Mountain with this crystal ball. When the test is over, they just need to have the ball with them, and that's it. By the way, all these crystal balls are absolutely identical. The guys realized that if one of them lost this ball, they could take it from the others. Then, sometime after they entered the mountain, the upperclassmen would follow them and try to take the balls from them. One of the guys turned to another and said that there were only brats there who didn't even have a single star, so it would be easy as pie. When the guys heard their conversation, they became scared, and Freya shouted that the explanations were over. They were starting the test right now. After these words, the guys rushed deeper into the forest, and Laika shouted at Zik to stay alive at all costs. He replied yes, and so did she. At that moment, Laika raised her hand and shouted for her guys to follow her. Zik told them to be careful and stood next to Freya. She asked if he was actually coming too, and he realized indeed that he was completely out of his mind with impatience. She asked again, impatience, not nervousness? He replied that he wasn't nervous at all and said goodbye to her, Madam Mentor. He calmly walked deeper into the forest, and Freya confirmed that he was a strange guy. When everything got dark, the examiner approached Freya and asked if everything was okay. She asked again, what exactly? He thought it was too early for newcomers to take such a test. Indeed, even if they already had the most basic skills, those with 1 star were only a few, and they had no real combat experience at all. How many people could pass such a test? Freya shouted that everything would be fine. There were plenty of poisonous creatures on Poison Dragon Mountain, but almost no monsters, and if there were any, they were very weak. Almost all of them were 1 star. Besides, as they saw, they were gathered in teams, and if that was the case, then in most cases, everything would be fine. The examiner replied that this was accepted, and Freya said that she really would release it later, and the examiner asked if he hadn't heard what she said. Freya smiled and replied, no, nothing. Well, they can begin. The upperclassmen also rushed into battle, and Freya asked how many of them would survive. She would even be interested to know. The guys decided to look for the little ones to take their pendants from them, and at that moment, the protagonist was nearby, and they realized they had quickly found the first one. He had so much time, and he was still here. Was he a complete idiot? They started shooting spears at him, when suddenly the main character sharply dodged and grabbed the arrow in his hand. He screamed, stop. He found them. The guys asked what this meant and what he was saying. Was he really so strong that he broke an arrow with his own hand? Zik rushed into battle and shouted, well, he's inviting them to play. At that moment, Selena began fighting the first monster, a frog. She exclaimed and destroyed this huge frog with her sword. At that moment, a second frog pounced on her from a tree, and Raymond shouted that it was from behind. He protected her and destroyed it. Ranjus also rushed to destroy the next frog, and Laika said that they were doing great and everything was going great. Laika, unlike them, single-handedly destroyed a huge mountain of frogs and stood before them smiling. Selena said that it was as expected of her. Raymond added that while they were fighting, she killed so many by herself. Laika blushed and replied that she was only a 2-star rank, so it was nothing. It was nothing to her, but something else was more important. A week had passed during the trial, and they had all gotten stronger. Both Selena and Raymond had received their first star. Selena replied that it was all thanks to her help, and Laika and Raymond thanked her for it. Ranjus thought about how the two of them had already reached 1 star while he hadn't. Selena shouted, Ranjus, he's also gotten stronger and will get a star very soon. Raymond added as a support that there was no need to rush such a matter. Ranjus smiled and thanked them, and Laika said that defeating a tree frog without a star rank was already awesome, and then he'd already trained with Zik before the trial. His spear skills are simply perfect, so he shouldn't worry. He'll definitely get his first star soon, and everything will be fine. Ranjus didn't expect such support from her and burst into tears. Laika looked up and said that it looked like it was getting dark soon, time to return to base. The guys confirmed that this was true. Traveling at night is too dangerous. When night fell, the guys found themselves in a strange situation. She saw an enemy in front of her and asked what he was doing in their base. All the guys tensed up and drew their swords, and the guy asked, had they discovered him? He was a 10th grader, right? Came to steal their crystal balls? He replied that it was exactly so. Now it was time for the upperclassmen to attack, and a 2-star brat at that. He smiled and said that this was exactly what the test was about, right? He didn't think this was her base, Laika, and she asked if that was the case. Why didn't he get out of here right now? He couldn't stand against them alone. He grinned and asked, who said he was alone? At that moment, many guys appeared around them, and Laika realized that 3 of them were fighting 1-star opponents behind them. Even Laika couldn't fight fully with these 3 useless ballast hanging over her, right? So he shouted at them to let them deal with them in peace. The boy drew his sword and began fighting, when suddenly Laika shouted, guys, they need to hold out until she comes back for them. During their duel, a strong wind picked up, and one of the boys ran up to Rangis, shouting for him to quickly hand over the crystal balls. He didn't know what to do, because if this continued, it would be bad. One day, Rangis asked Zik, what? He asks how to defeat an opponent who is stronger than him? Rangis replied, yes, he doesn't have a star yet, so he wants to know what to do when someone stronger appears. Zik yelled at him to surrender, and Ranjus became terrified. Zik asked again, what did he think? Someone without even 1 star would never defeat a 3 or 4-star enemy. Ranjus asked again, how could that be? He replied that even if the opponent had 1 or 2 stars, they could still handle it. Ranjus was surprised by this, and Zik replied, he was talking about the upcoming test, right? As far as he remembered, the magical beasts on Poison Dragon Mountain were stronger than 2 stars. Besides, he'd heard that the high school students who were supposed to attack him would be no higher than 2 stars, and if that were true, there was still a way to survive. Ranjus asked again, what was that? Zik was a simple man. He needed to find a hole in the enemy's defense, that's all. That's why, even if the opponent was only 2 stars, even he had no power, no one could turn the tide of battle in their favor if they could find a hole in their defense. Ranjus asked again, but how could he find that opening? He told him to hold on and keep fighting until the enemy opened up. Ranjus exclaimed in surprise and asked why he was so surprised. Was he really going to fight an opponent stronger than him? Or did he think he'd deliberately show off his strength for a much weaker opponent? Of course not, but could he hold out long enough? Zik replied that whether he could hold out or not didn't matter. He should at least hold out of sheer stubbornness. If he couldn't even do that, then defeating an opponent of a higher rank was a pipe dream. Incidentally, unless he was at a special level like Laika. In his condition, he was perfectly capable of holding out against a 2-star opponent, so he shouldn't worry about it. Ranjus replied that was probably true, and Zik said he still lacked self-confidence. He needed to believe in himself, and that was the next most important thing after strength. Ranjus replied that he understood everything, but before he could finish his sentence, Zik shouted that if that was the case, he would offer him one more piece of advice. Don't create difficulties. They don't need to think about how to find the enemy's defense or the difference in their strength. He simply needs to patiently wait for the enemy to open up and thrust the spear directly into that gap. That would be enough. Ranjus asked, "Throw it straight?" Zik replied yes, that was the way to strike an opponent who outshines him. At that moment, the boy continued to attack him, and Ranjus realized he was weakened, so out of sheer stubbornness, he would hold on and wait for an opening. The boy suddenly exclaimed, "Damn it, let him die already," and lunged at him with his sword, and at that moment Ranjus realized, here. A moment later, he brought the spear towards the boy and struck him straight in the chest. He fell to the ground and began coughing, realizing his mistake. Ranjus was able to defeat his opponent, and at that moment, a star lit up in his chest. Laika said it looked like he'd lost, looking at his opponent, who screamed that it couldn't be true. They were 2 stars. Why was there such a difference in strength? Laika pounced on him with incredible speed and struck with her own powers. Having studied axe fighting, she was able to combine this knowledge with swordsmanship, and then Zik recommended the axe for that very reason. His mistake was attacking them, and the guy screamed, "What?" Laika exclaimed that he was finished and destroyed her opponent, who screamed in pain and terror and fell to the ground unconscious. At that moment, Laika ran up to the guys and asked if they were okay. She was very surprised when she saw the embarrassed Ranjus, who had defeated an opponent for the first time, and they shouted with joy at their victory. Selena congratulated Ranjus on earning his first star, and Raymond added that he was doing well. Ranjus shed tears and thanked them both because he was very happy. Laika smiled too. Everyone had received stars, and if they were to face opponents of that level, they'd somehow deal with them. I wonder what Zik was doing now? One of the frightened guys Zik had defeated was running through the forest. He screamed hysterically, "Don't come near!" Who was he? And what kind of monster was this? Zik had single-handedly taken out several of his allies, causing the guy to become very scared and try to escape. MC laughed and asked what happened. Was there really no one he could play with? The poor kids kept running away from him in fear, screaming that he was a crazy idiot. Why was an elementary school student hunting high school students anyway? Aren't they supposed to be hunting them? One of them tripped, and Zik walked up to him and said he was already tired of playing tag. He didn't want to get up? Let him get up and fight him. His gaze scared the boy, and he started crying, and then he just passed out. MC didn't expect this, and said that they had become completely weak. They had completely lost their nerve. All they knew was how to run away, while at first they were all so eager to fight. He glanced at the guy who had been watching him the whole time, and asked why he didn't come closer to watch. Although if he was just watching, then there were no complaints about his actions, right? Then he would continue having fun, without holding back. He ran on, and that guy came out of the bushes and thought, what does this all mean? He not only beat up the upperclassmen, but also noticed his presence? He needs to report this. They all returned to Freya. The guy said that a week had passed since the start of the test. At the moment, 30% of the 7th graders had failed. However, the remaining ones are gradually starting to adapt. He thinks the current number is going to decrease significantly. She asked about the upperclassmen, and the guy in charge of them started mumbling, trying to find the words, and then said, in short, they are running. She asked again, perplexed. The upperclassmen are running? And from whom could they be running? There are no magical creatures on Poison Dragon Mountain that they need to run from. He told her that they were running from Zik. He was attacking the upperclassmen and chasing them. At first they fought him back, but now they all just started running. Who is this Zik anyway? He beats up his elders with such delight and even started hunting them. That's unheard of. The man agreed with him. He may be the son of the clan head, but although perhaps that's precisely why he's abnormal. Even more so, he's already exceeding the level of talented. He looks more like a true master. Freya said, puzzled, that she also thought he was a little strange. He seemed to have deliberately chosen to act alone, and he started out somehow too relaxed. So that means he was a hunter from the very beginning, and not the hunted? So he's a monster. The creaking of wheels was heard from the side. The carriage Freya had been waiting for had finally pulled up. Her subordinates became agitated and asked, what the hell is this? Was she really going to unleash this poisonous dragon on the mountain? The power of this creature reaches 3 stars. These children simply won't be able to resist it. She smiled and assured them that everything would be fine. She deliberately changed it a little. It doesn't attack anyone below 2 stars, so most likely, children won't be harmed. Her subordinates asked why she suddenly decided to use it, to which she replied that such was the current leader's order. She looked into the cage with anticipation. She couldn't wait to see the power that made even Eldragon's soldiers call it a monster. She wondered if it could handle it. She ordered her subordinates to let it in at nightfall. Time passed. The children felt as if the ground was shaking slightly, and Laika began to wonder why. She had a bad feeling about this. Raymond suggested that it was the upperclassmen again, and Ranjis said perhaps it was a magical beast, for example, an enraged boar or something similar. Laika found this too doubtful, and suddenly the earthquake intensified. A tree fell right at them. Laika immediately warned everyone of the danger, and they scattered to the sides, after which they hid and drew their weapons. Then a huge stone golem felled a tree on them. MC at this time didn't even know what to do after dealing with several high school students and monsters. He was constantly bored. Lately, no one wants to fight, even the instructor who was watching him, and he disappeared. He was already feeling somehow sad. And then he sensed something strange. A 3-star level. Are there really monsters of this level in the vicinity of Poison Dragon Mountain? Maybe some unknown creature has managed to settle here over the course of 1,000 years? However, for today's children, a 3-star opponent is too serious a test. Even for Laika, it's impossible. Eliminating such threats before the exam begins is the instructor's responsibility. And then a thought occurred to him. What if they're deliberately ignoring this? And what are they thinking? But for him, this is just what he needs. He wants to have a little more fun. In anticipation, he jumped off the pile of monster bodies and set off. Meanwhile, the children tried their best to resist this golem. Selena struck him with her sword, but her blade simply bounced off the stone. She was surprised that she couldn't damage him. And then, Raymond stepped in. He swung his shield at the golem's head, but even that didn't help. Then Laika used lightning flash. The lightning struck the golem, and only a piece of stone broke off from its body. She realized that using only aura, she could damage its shell. That is, she alone could fight him. Ranjis nervously asked what they should do, and she declared that she would distract him while they ran. They all protested. They couldn't leave her here to her fate, and she told them that they would only get in her way. Let them look at his hand, which she had just injured. Even with aura, that was all she could achieve. At their current level, they would never be able to damage him. Raymond agreed with her, but he stepped forward anyway and declared he would support her to ensure her attack reached its target. She was greatly surprised by his determination, and then the other children followed his example and rallied around her. Laika was overjoyed by their help, and in high spirits, they rushed into battle. Charging herself with lightning, Laika rushed toward the golem. It wanted to hit her with its fist, but Raymond immediately protected her, taking the blow himself. Then Ranjis and Selena rushed to the attack, each striking. Thanks to them, Laika achieved her goal and used the Art of Thunder Greatsword to deliver a powerful blow with all her might. A roar resounded. Sparks and lightning scattered throughout the area, the impact even breaking a couple of trees. Having lost all strength, the girl leaned on her sword to keep from falling, and then Ranjis ran up to her, worried. She reassured them, saying she was fine since she was alive, but she had exhausted the true source. She asked how Raymond was, since he had taken the first blow. Seeing that he was okay, she calmed down and suggested they return to base. But it turned out that the golem wasn't hurt at all after that blow. It got up and ran towards them. Laika noticed this and managed to push Ranjis aside at the last moment, causing the golem to grab her and squeeze her so hard that she screamed. She clenched her teeth in nervousness, realizing they had miscalculated. The monster was still moving. Selena exclaimed that it was simply impossible. And how was it still standing after such a blow? Ranjis struck the golem with his spear, telling it to let go of Laika, and it suddenly waved the hand it was holding her in, frightening the boy. Suddenly, a huge tree fell from the sky onto the monster, thanks to which he immediately let go of the girl, and Ranjis, helping her up, ran with the others away from the monster, asking if she was okay. She told him that she was alive, but what just happened? And then they heard Zik's cheerful voice. He descended to them straight from the sky and asked with a smile, "What kind of clay scarecrow is this?" A little earlier, MC saw this bright flash of lightning in the sky and realized that Laika and the others stumbled upon this monster before him. Once upon a time, he could cover such a distance in the blink of an eye. And how did it come to this? Laika's team certainly consists of promising fighters, but how long can they hold out against an enemy with 3 stars? And then an idea occurred to him. He could try that thing he recently learned. He dug his fingers into the tree bark, pulled it out by the roots, and threw it into the sky with a loud and furious cry. Watching the tree recede, he grinned contentedly. It wasn't for nothing he'd learned this. With his current body, he couldn't do without it. He just used the art of dragon throwing, which had been given to him before the trials with the textbooks called Eldragon's Foundation of Martial Arts. The art of dragon combat, like the art of dragon slaying, didn't contain martial arts, but only basic movements and principles of circulating the true source. It was a simple textbook, but it suited him perfectly. After all, he hadn't had any experience with ranged combat in his past life. He decided to put all these thoughts aside and hurry to their aid. At the moment, Ranjis was quite surprised by his presence here. He waved at them with a smile and asked, "How are they doing here? Are they all alive?" He confirmed it, but that wasn't the point right now. that golem had attacked them. He asked, his eyes shining with delight. So that thing is called a golem? His presence was palpable, but he didn't sense any life force within him. It was a rather unusual creature. At that moment, a golem charged at him, striking it with a swung fist, but he simply stopped it and said with a manic grin that this guy was quite tough. With such strength, he couldn't be taken down unless he used his aura. But killing him the usual way would be too boring, right? He pushed his fist aside, and Laika noted that he was still wreaking havoc. Ranjis was surprised that he found this boring, while the golem brought its hands together to strike. Zik immediately noticed that the thing, despite its weight, was quite fast and blocked the blow. There was a crash, but he endured it and told the children to retreat, as it was dangerous, and they ran away. After this, MC pushed the golem away and ran towards it, thinking, the shell is strong on the outside, but he wonders if it is as strong on the inside. He decided to test this, jumped high, then used the first technique of the dragon break on it, and struck with a world explosion. The golem's body cracked, stones were scattered everywhere, and he thought, without destroying it from the outside, if he used the world explosion, channeling the power of the true source from within, he could easily kill it. Looking at the defeated golem, he laughed and exclaimed, how does he like this? Now this is what he calls fun. A month later, Zik arrived at the Eldragon residence, not of his own free will, but by summoning. The month-long testing period was successfully completed. Nothing else of note happened after the attack of the 3-star golem. Zik's team in Dragon Mountain reduced the number of 7th graders by almost 70%, but after spending a long time in deadly conditions, many of the survivors successfully reached the rank of 1 star. Then, immediately after the end of the trials, the head of the Eldragon clan personally summoned Zik. Freya accompanied him to the residence. As they walked to his office, he constantly wondered what the head wanted from him, and she immediately reminded him of manners and respect, saying that to him, he was the master head of the clan. He asked why she was picking on him so much, and she said, it's obvious that the reason for his behavior during the trial is his own fault. He asked what was wrong with his behavior, and she turned to him and exclaimed, according to the assignment, it was the upperclassmen who were supposed to hunt the younger ones and take their crystal balls, and not the other way around. How is this even possible? This is unheard of impudence. Because of him, not a single upperclassman was able to obtain the crystal ball, and in the end, everyone was forced to retake the exam. He pointed out that it wasn't forbidden, and she exclaimed that no one in their right mind could imagine that an elementary school student would attack elders. With a heavy sigh, she calmed down and asked him not to display his frivolous attitude in front of the clan head. He asked the reason, and she told him that they would simply kill him, regardless of the fact that he was a child. Under her leadership, she would not tolerate such a thing. He noted that they had a rather dangerous situation, and she greeted the security guard at the entrance, then knocked on the door and addressed the gentleman of the clan head, introducing herself. With his permission, they entered the office together, and she reported to him that she had brought Zik. The clan head looked at him sternly and asked why he had attacked the upperclassmen. MC was starting to get fed up with all this. They all kept repeating the same thing. Then he'd ask him a counter question. Wasn't it okay to attack them? The conditions for passing the test were simple. Keep the crystal ball and survive a month on Dragon Mountain. He heard nothing else. He simply followed the rules and spent his time as he pleased. If there were any restrictions, they should have been discussed before the test began. Freya cast him a displeased glance and was about to yell at him for his insolence, but the head of the clan wouldn't allow it. He released his terrifying yet oppressive and very strong aura, causing her to almost fall over, and was already sure he would kill the boy, but he stood firm. He angrily told him to stop intimidating him. It irritated him. The man was surprised by his boldness and calmed down, and the boy asked why he'd called him here. Balza asked how he'd done it. According to the report, he defeated not only the high school students, but also the golem. Moreover, now he was standing before him as if nothing had happened. How did he gain such power? Zik answered him, it's all because he is him. There are no other reasons. The man gave him a displeased look and said, as he was informed, he is acting like an idiot. However, he will receive a reward for defeating the golem. He will be given either an item from the dragon treasury or the rite of passage to the second tier of the dragon hall. He must choose one of the two. Freya was very surprised and thought, so they will also give him a reward? What is even going on here? The dragon hall and the treasury are repositories of the rarest treasures, which the heads of the family, starting from the first, have been collecting for 1,000 years. The dragon hall houses all sorts of books, including those now considered forbidden, and the dragon treasury contains relics of former clan heads, legendary weapons, spiritual elixirs, artifacts, and much more. Valuable artifacts from various eras are collected inside. These rooms, which could be called the secret treasury of House Eldragon, are strictly guarded, and entry is permitted only to a select few. In particular, to gain entry to the Dragon Hall above the second tier, one must demonstrate exceptionally outstanding training results. So, despite all his insolence and stupidity, the clan head still recognized him as outstanding? MC asked discontentedly. If this is the reward, then why not give him two at once? He called him too greedy, but the clan head ignored him, and ordered him to leave. But MC wasn't finished. Since that was the case, he also had something to say, and then Freya immediately grabbed him by the collar to save his situation, and excitedly exclaimed that it was a great honor to receive an award personally from the head of the family. They would leave right now. She dragged him to the door, and Zik said something to Balza as a parting word. As long as he suppressed his emotions like this, no matter how hard he tried, he would not become stronger. The man immediately became angry. Their auras clashed with each other, and Freya finally asked him to shut up and promised the head of the family to take him away from here right now. When they finally left the office, the man wondered what kind of aura that was. Meanwhile, Freya began to scold him and shouted, "What kind of person is he? What was he even thinking? How could he talk to the head of the family like that? Didn't he even hear her before entering the office?" He told her in response that he had actually been holding back as best he could, and she exclaimed indignantly, "And this is what he called holding back? Why could he speak politely to her and the instructors, but not to him?" He told her that he was actually his father, and she said that with his strength and the way he acted, he didn't seem like an ordinary child at all. Who was he anyway? He answered her with a smile that he had just said he was him. She measured him with her gaze and thought, they drank the blood of an ancient dragon as infants, so the head of a lineage that contains the power of the highest among them, their king, is impossible to resist. That was how it should be. But what kind of child was this that didn't even flinch before him? It seemed she needed to recheck his lineage, starting with the birth record. She asked, so which reward would he choose? Either the right to enter the second tier of the Dragon Hall, or one item from the Dragon Treasury. He said with a pleading look that he would like 2 rewards, but she immediately refused him. In that case, he thought about it and chose knowledge after all. He had very little knowledge of the current era, and he was also interested in the medicines and tools that had developed over thousands of years. So he went to the Dragon Hall with his friends. Rongus was very excited, and MC asked if he was really that happy about this. Of course he was happy. What he had recently learned, the art of dragon slaying and the art of the dragon spear, was already incredible, but this was a chance to learn martial arts of an even higher level. He hadn't thought the reward for completing the trial would be so luxurious. He was simply delighted. Laika appeared behind him, saying that she was interested in how much knowledge she could absorb in a limited time, so they would have to try hard. Zik was surprised that there was a time limit at all, and she explained to him they could only reach the first tier, but she thought the basic rules for the second were the same. They'll only be given 1 book, but they can read whatever they want until the time runs out. That's why it's so important to manage your time wisely. The others agreed with her, and she said, by the way, she heard that he chose the Dragon Hall as a special reward, not the Dragon Treasury. Why? Knowing him, she thought he'd take something from the treasury. He replied that he'd actually thought about it, but knowledge was more important to him right now. Laika thought about it and understood why he'd chosen it. They say the books on the second tier are much rarer than those on the first. Especially in martial arts, the difference between the first and second tiers is simply colossal, although it's still unlikely to find anything as outstanding as her Thunder Greatsword art. MC wasn't listening to her at all. He was already eager to get inside. They approached the Dragon Hall, and the man at the entrance informed them that they had 5 hours. Inside, they were to remain silent and strictly adhere to the time limits. Zik noted that it was impossible to tell right away whether it was too much or too little time. Laika agreed with him and said that he should first choose 1 book to read, and then, before the time ran out, read as many others as he could. Ranjis noted, they say that truly great people can pore over several books at once, but he would first set himself the goal of finding at least a treatise that suited him within the allotted time. They entered the Dragon Hall, which was a very extensive library, and MC noted, it looked like even finding the right book would be difficult. Ranjis looked around in admiration. All the children were delighted, even Zik. The Dragon Hall was larger than he had imagined. He grinned and decided to get down to business. Would there be knowledge that could surprise even him? He headed to the bookshelves and decided to search properly, but ran into a big problem. He simply didn't understand half the words in the book. Too much unfamiliar information fell on him. Apparently, 1,000 years is too long. Who would have thought that during this time, this world would be connected to others? About 900 years ago, a crack suddenly appeared in the wall between dimensions, and a rift appeared. Beyond lay another world, engulfed in a whirlwind of chaos, and its name, of course, was the World of Chaos. In this other world, a monster known as Chaos ran rampant. To fight them, the people of that world were endowed with a special, true, primordial energy. House Eldragon fought shoulder to shoulder against Chaos. Hardened by their shared battles, 4 powerful heroes from another world became part of the Eldragon line. They founded the 4 great houses, whose line continues to this day. MC remembered that the enraged boar was shrouded in some strange black haze, and Laika's lightning-fast aura also, it turned out, came from another world. Then it's no wonder he didn't know about it. But the most interesting thing is magic. New techniques that came from another world. Zik was very interested in this. Where is the book to learn how to use this magic? Why isn't there one? These kinds of things are usually kept next to historical chronicles. Because of his enthusiastic shouting, the librarian asked him to remain silent. MC was surprised. No one was there, and he could only hear a voice. He noticed a barely noticeable glowing stream coming from him and thought, is this that magic? A technique for transmitting only a voice. He doesn't feel anything except the presence of the true source. This magic suddenly began to gather all the books, which surprised him greatly. He noticed threads attached to the books and exclaimed, "Does that mean energy can be drawn from the true source in the form of threads and used to move objects? This is such an interesting technique." The librarian ordered him to remain silent, and he, trying to grab one of the books, exclaimed in response, "Is it possible to be quiet when such an interesting thing is in front of you? Let him come up to him and demonstrate it to him right now." The man only pulled harder on the strings, grabbing Zik with them and pulling him toward the exit, saying his time was up. He roughly threw him out of the dragon hall, which made him very indignant, and exclaimed, "What the hell is this? Something else he has no idea about." He didn't care how he was roughly thrown out of the hall. Now he just wanted to see how he used this magic. Ranjus ran up to him excitedly and asked if something had happened. Laika asked what he had done to be thrown out so rudely. He replied that he hadn't even noticed how carried away he had become. "And how are they doing? Did they get anything?" Ranjus happily replied that he had taken a combat treatise called The Art of the Cloud Water Spear, and also, he thought, had managed to learn a simple movement technique. Selena also got hold of some movement techniques, and she also picked up a combat treatise, Acid Sword Art. Raymond learned defensive techniques from the Eldragon school there, and also picked up a book, Shield Art. MC smiled awkwardly because these were all the martial arts he'd created in his past life, just for fun. He asked Laika what she was doing there, and she showed him the book. They say the first head himself created it, The Art of the Heavy Wave of the Great Sword. This technique was later improved by the 15th head, and it became known as the Moving Wave of the Great Sword. Well, she already has a martial art lineage, so it's more for study. Zik wondered, were they talking about that 15th head of the lineage again? Dragon's Breath and Hall of Wild Dragon martial arts. All of that was also the work of the 15th head of the lineage. In the Dragon Hall, there were many treatises on martial arts created by him, but next to them were many revised editions. Are the revised editions really his doing too? He's very interested in all of this. When he came here, he thought he'd be bored, but the future promises to be very interesting. 5 years have passed, and now they're all 12 years old. Laika was wandering around the grounds, looking for Zik with the others, and someone told her they'd just been at the training grounds. She already realized what they were doing there and went there. Right now, they've all surrounded Zik, who was ready to get out of this situation with just one move. Some time ago, a subordinate of Balza's came to report that a special crack had appeared. He clarified, "There's no mistake, right?" Commander Ian of the Black Dragon Order replied that there couldn't be a mistake. According to the investigation, there's an 80% chance that magical water is present inside this crack. Balza noted that this crack appeared in a very fortunate place. Of all possible places, this is where the magical water is. A person who drinks this water becomes a mage. The body of one who drinks magical water becomes capable of transforming the power of the spring into magic. This magical power unleashed new techniques and brought revolution to the world, while at the same time, fierce territorial struggles erupted over the sources of magical water, springs. The number of mages largely determines the military families, but not a single magical spring existed in Eldragon's territory. For a house that did not possess it, there was only one way to obtain this water: capturing a special rift. Currently, House Eldragon has only a few mages, including Balza. All of them are battle-hardened warriors who obtained magical water by capturing access to special rifts. And yet, in the current situation, they are outnumbered by other houses, so capturing special rifts is the most important mission for their house. I noted, as he said, the place where this is located, the Forest of the Prosperous Dragon, is extremely dangerous. Local border clashes have recently occurred in the surrounding areas. The Forest of the Prosperous Dragon is too vast. Most of it is within Eldragon's territory, but part of it extends into the domain of another house. If those who claim ownership of the forest call it the Forest of the Prosperous Dog, it is House Cerberus. The man said that most of the forest is indeed within their territory, but given the scale of the location, there is a possibility that the special zone forming around the rift will spread into House Cerberus's territory. Considering that these are the same stray dogs, it is highly likely that they will flock there in a pack. Balza agreed with him. They have an excellent sense of smell. In any case, they will most likely detect it. They need to prepare for a possible struggle for control of the rift, given that the available measures on both sides are very limited. Perhaps they should act before they suspect anything. Have him immediately transmit to all dragon nests that they are conducting selection trials. The men went to carry out his orders, and now Laika came to the training ground and told her friends that they had worked well together. MC smiled confidently. They all rushed at him simultaneously, but he blocked every blow. Ranjas's spear jabbed him in the cheek, and he grinned, noting that it was a good attack, but he was overextending himself. That's how you lose the strength of your spear technique. And Selena, chasing speed, loses power. She needs to learn balance. Raymond is doing fine, although his passive ability hasn't gone away. He needs to get used to attacking more often. He suggested they try again, and Laika noted that nothing has changed. It's still an insane sight. He asked her what she meant by that, and she told him, taking a blow with your own body without using the true source is pure madness. He was indignant, saying that this was full-fledged training. He told her to look at his muscles. They were the fruits of that training. Even without using the true source, his body had become stronger. She asked him to stop fighting at least for a while he spoke, but he ignored her, and Ron just struck him, asking her if Zik was completely insane. She tiredly covered her face with her hand and said, to be honest, they're all weird, since they keep attacking him as if it were nothing special. Raymond asked how it was even possible to achieve such protection without the true source, and Selena exclaimed with delight that it was simply incredible, and the human body was capable of it. Laika said that he was not human, so they should not put him in the same league. Do they know what the elders called him? The miracle monster of the Eastern Core. MC said that this was the first time he heard it, and in general, it was not very respectful towards him. And what business did she come here for? Or did she want to join the training? She answered him that training was certainly good, but there were more important things. She wanted to tell him something. It seemed they would have to meet children from other dragon nests, and it would happen quite soon. Hearing this, Ranjus was very surprised, and Raymond said he knew this would happen someday, but still, this was unexpected. Selena asked, is it because of the next trial? Laika shrugged. She didn't know such details. Zik asked where she got this information, and she told him that if you look at the instructors, everything becomes immediately clear. He noted that he had never even considered such a thing, and she sighed heavily, saying, in any case, let them be careful. In the Western building, there are 2 other candidates for the future head besides them. MC grinned. He was looking forward to meeting them. Several days passed. Everyone gathered on the training grounds, regardless of year. Most likely, these are the same children they had recently spoken about. Finally, the instructor arrived. Freya ordered everyone to shut their mouths, and when silence finally reigned, she announced that in 3 days they would fight students from other dragon nests. They were surprised. Usually this only happens during the graduation exam, and she said there were various reasons for this. She couldn't give details yet, but she will say one thing. Whoever wins this duel will receive a special task. Zik's eyes immediately sparkled with delight. That is, they are being forced to fight specifically for this purpose. Freya said that the tournament would be a qualifying tournament. 7 people would be chosen from each of the 4 buildings, east, west, south, and north. Let them decide by the end of today who will participate. One of the students asked if these 7 would be chosen from among them. The upperclassmen, right? Freya asked why he thought she had gathered everyone they would choose from all years. The students were very surprised. The upperclassmen immediately began verbally attacking the younger ones, saying that they didn't know how to do anything. Besides them, no one here knew how to fight. They were all weaklings. Freya said that it didn't matter how, but everything had to be decided today. After that, the confrontation between the upperclassmen and the younger ones began. An upperclassman named Rick told the brats to listen to him carefully. The 7 who would fight would be chosen from among them. Naturally, no one should have any objections. Laika exclaimed that she objected. Of course, they had to choose from among the younger ones too. She also had the right to participate. He chuckled, asking, isn't this Lady Laika herself? It seems she misunderstood, but they are talking about real strength now. No matter how noble her lineage, she will lose in a duel of pure strength. Then she stepped forward and showed him her 3 stars, defiantly asking, does this count as real strength? He was very surprised. They said they only had 2 stars at most. And when did she manage to get that? She said that she is also in favor of choosing based on strength. So what will he say? Are there 7 people stronger than her among the upperclassmen? If there aren't any, then they need to choose from the juniors. The guy got nervous. He didn't know what to say and exclaimed, it's because she is special, but other brats are no match for the seniors. MC said that he was already annoying everyone with his whining. Then this guy indignantly pointed his finger at him and exclaimed, what did he just say? He repeated it and asked, it seems like to them they are just a bunch of weaklings, right? If so, then they could fight right now until only 7 remained. Laika called out to him indignantly. That would also be a problem. It was too cruel. She offered them another option. How about holding a qualifying match among those willing? Regardless of their year, let everyone who wants to fight in 3 days participate. If the elders are confident in their strength, there shouldn't be any problems. The guy agreed, even though he considered it a waste of time. And when they parted, Laika turned to Zik and asked, he would also participate in the selection, right? Of course he would. But besides himself, he had included the other children, even without their consent. Ranjus was greatly surprised and exclaimed, were they really going to fight seniors in their final year? He calmly confirmed it. After all, they had trained together for so long. If they didn't show results now, then when? Selena became very nervous, feeling some kind of intense pressure, and Raymond said that all they could do was give it their all. As usual, the standard lineup had gathered. Laika turned to the other underclassmen and asked if anyone else wanted to try out in the arena. Of course, no one wanted to. They were afraid of the upperclassmen, especially since they were stronger than them. MC sighed heavily and asked why they weren't enthusiastic. Fighting stronger opponents is where you gain the most experience. After that, he turned to the upperclassmen and told them to show him what they were really made of. One of them slung his sword over his shoulder and cursed, saying that these childish whims were a real headache. No matter how hard they tried, they still wouldn't win. Everyone there, except Laika, was a 2-star kid. Their words made Ranjis uneasy, and Zik noticed his gloomy face and asked if he was worried. Of course he was worried, after all. Their opponents were 3-star upperclassmen. MC reminded them that they had undergone serious training with him over the past 5 years. They were doing extremely well, so they needed to believe in themselves more. His words encouraged them, and then one of the upperclassmen approached them with a sword, telling them to stop chatting. They had no time for this nonsense. Let them attack quickly. He would show them their place. After that, a fight broke out, and the other students were surprised. The younger students easily beat the older ones. That's how strong they were. The upperclassmen he had defeated were shocked. No one expected this. MC was very pleased with the result. They all did an excellent job. Ranjis' parrying technique and ability to spot the slightest opening had noticeably improved. Selena also mastered the Sword of Wind and Flowers perfectly, a style built on a large number of attacks. Raymond had become much better at tactical play. He was excellent at alternating between shield and sword techniques. This is an excellent result of their training. If this continues, they will gain confidence through real battles. And Laika also became stronger, that's obvious. She easily struck her opponent with lightning, which surprised the others. Rick exclaimed that it was simply impossible. They have 3 stars each, and they can't lose to those with only 2. Zik chose him as his target. He approached him and said that he was so inexperienced. And after such a result, he is still talking such nonsense? Age, the number of stars, they are just numbers. In battle, only the one who wins is strong. And if he is weak, he will simply lose. Rick called him an idiot. It is the number of stars that determines strength. A brat like him doesn't even know this? MC answered him with a smirk. Whether there are stars or not, if you crush a heart, a person will die. Let him not close his eyes to the essence. Strength in battle is simply the ability to win. Rick felt uneasy, but he still did not want to admit that he was right and told him to shut up. Who the hell was he? He's actually a senior student, so he shouldn't think his childish babble will do anything. He wanted to spare him because he was still little, but it would be too late to cry, and he wouldn't forgive him now. Zik was tired of listening to all this nonsense and told him to just show him what he could do first. It was just the 2 of them left. Let him show him what martial art he'd studied and how much he'd trained. He was very excited about the upcoming fight. Rick nervously clenched his teeth and then pounced on him, telling him not to dare underestimate him. As soon as he approached, Zik punched him in the face, which immediately sent him flying several meters away, and said that he had trained well. Silence fell on the arena. He knocked him down even before he saw the results of his training. At the same time, in the West Wing, on the training ground, all the students were thoroughly beaten. Some were lying unconscious, and others were trying to come to their senses. And this was done to them by one of the candidates for the post of the next head of the family, Veniel Fafnald Eldragon. He sighed heavily and said, "This one, like that one, they are all useless." His right hand Alan approached him along with those who had passed the selection. Among them was one remarkable boy, Retin. Veniel asked, despite being the youngest, he had 3 stars. He excitedly confirmed it and said that it was simply wonderful. He knows that he likes talented people, right? If he proves useful, he will make him his subordinate. Retin bowed excitedly, thanking him for it, and thought, since Veniel was here, their West Wing wouldn't lose. And then all he had to do was show his results in the honorable special mission. Veniel would become the next clan head, and when that happened, he would become the current head's direct subordinate. Alan approached Veniel to tell him something. It looked like Laika would be participating in the East Wing selection team. The boy scratched his head in confusion and hissed. What an annoying nuisance she was. He decided not to dwell on it and said that no matter how talented she was, they would still win and complete the special mission, making their older brothers regret it. The position of the next clan head would be his. Soon, all the students from all the buildings gathered in the arena. Laika noted that there were some who had failed the exam, but even so, the number of participants had already noticeably decreased. Ranjis agreed with her and thought, those who failed don't get here. They're called half-dragons, like his father. Understanding what he was thinking, Laika slapped him on the back and said that they had become representatives of the Eastern Corps and passed the selection, so he should hold his head up. Noticing that Zik was silent, she asked if something had happened. He answered that he was simply testing the strength of the students gathered there. And at that moment, Rick's excited voice was heard from the side, exclaiming, "This is just like him. It can't be possible." MC glanced at the 2 students running towards them and noticed that much had changed. Rick and Aaron, running towards him as fast as they could, exclaimed that from that day on, they had reconsidered their attitude towards fighting. Reaching them, Aaron caught her breath and Rick said delightedly. Even he, just an insignificant representative of the Eldragon clan, sincerely respects the truly strong. Poor Ranjus was so scared of them that he started crying, and Zik awkwardly told the two that it wasn't bad at all. He pulled himself together and looked around. Except for the east building, everyone had 3 stars. As expected, there was no level 4 here. He glanced at the children from the other buildings. There were some who were already halfway there. He was very curious to know what kind of weapons they had. While Laika was chatting, her cousin Sandy pounced on her with a hug, rubbing her cheek against hers and asking, "No one's making fun of her, right?" She awkwardly answered that everything was fine, and Ranjus politely asked who she was. She introduced her to them. She was her cousin, Sandy Tayapona. They were very surprised. After all, she was the heiress of one of the 4 great houses. Sandy asked her cousin who these children were, and when she called them her friends, she frowned and said, "Friends, of course, that's good. But aren't they a bit weak for the comrades of a candidate for the position of the clan head?" They felt uneasy from her words. And then MC challenged her, saying that it would become clear if they fought. Laika introduced him to her. He was a candidate just like her. Sandy asked skeptically, was he the bastard? She didn't think this illegitimate boy was still alive. Laika asked why she was so rude, to which she replied, even if he was illegitimate, he was still her rival. What kind of friend was he to her? With such an attitude, she would never defeat the other candidates. In general, they don't even reach the 3-star level. Maybe this is just the level of the East building? Zik responded that if she continued to look down on them like that, she would soon stumble herself. She didn't like his tone and said, even if the blood of a clan head flows in him, he is just a bastard brat. Did he decide to contradict her? He calmly replied that it was just a warning, and just as she was about to start arguing, a representative of the Northern Corps, Aegis Vanblade, stepped between them and told her not to interfere with the other team. Ranjus immediately recognized him, but Zik was completely indifferent. Sandy angrily asked the guy not to interfere, saying she was having a serious conversation, but he refused, saying the qualifying trial was about to begin. Everyone was heatedly discussing the upcoming trial, and then the instructor finally appeared in the arena. As soon as he spoke, everyone stopped talking and focused their attention on him, standing at attention, and he announced the beginning of the qualifying trials. His name is Teach Mentric. He is the commander of the Gold Squad, nicknamed the Tamer. This trial is an elimination tournament among 4 corps. First, the 4 corps are divided into 2 groups, and the winners meet in the final. The battle format is one-on-one duels. Participants from each corps come forward one by one in a predetermined order and fight. Of the 7 participants from each corps, the corps that first defeats 4 of the opposing fighters wins. Once the trials begin, changing the order of the participants is prohibited. The performance order is also part of the strategy, so they should think it through in advance. And one last thing, the selected participants will be assigned a special task. NC immediately smiled. This special task is extremely important for House Eldragon. Whoever receives it will make a great contribution to the house. Everyone understood what this meant. Make a contribution, a big step towards the place of the head of the family. Teach said that they would begin the distribution. Representatives of each school take turns coming forward and taking 1 stone from this box. He called for a representative from the Western Corps. Vanille stepped forward and took an unremarkable stone from the box, and Teach ordered him to return to his place. Seeing him, Laika was slightly surprised, and Zik asked if he was an acquaintance of hers. She confirmed it. He was the guy she was talking about. The candidate for the post of leader from the Western Corps, Vanille Fafnilde Eldragon. NC was interested, and it wasn't just about Vanille. The Western Corps as a whole has a lot of strong fighters. The other corps have well-trained ones too, but everyone feels the difference in strength, right? And then there's that guy, Retin. He hadn't seen him in a while. He was also a cut above the others during the entrance exam, but to think that at his age, he could reach the 3-star level. It seems he's been working hard and leveling up, which even impresses him. Retin noticed someone in their group and got angry, and then disgruntled voices were heard from the stands. Some boy pointed at Ranjus and exclaimed, "What is that loser doing in a place like this?" Raymond immediately asked if he was okay, but Ranjus didn't seem to pay any attention to them, more uncomfortable with Retin staring at them. Teach called the next representative, the representative of the Northern Corps. Aegis took the stone, after which the representative of the Southern Corps came out, and lastly, the representative of the Eastern Corps. No one came out. Laika told Zik that he was actually called, and he asked in confusion, "Is that really his name?" She, as if it were something obvious, confirmed it. After all, he was the strongest among them. Everyone nodded vigorously, agreeing with her, but he refused, saying, "In such matters, the young usually play the main role." Laika didn't understand what he was even talking about. After all, they were all the same age. He had no choice but to come forward as the representative of the Corps, and then Sandy became very indignant. "Why is this bastard going, not Laika?" Her cousin answered her that he was the strongest among them, and she objected. That couldn't be true. Besides, he didn't even have 3 stars. This couldn't be done. After all, it was a fight with Vanille for the position of leader. Laika smiled confidently and told her that everything was fine. They were strong enough. After everyone took a stone, Teach told them to try infusing the power of the true source into the stone they had just taken. Their stones glowed 2 colors, blue and red. This was the division into groups. The first battle would be between the Eastern and Northern Corps, then between the Western and Southern. The brute from the Northern Corps gave them a displeased look, and poor Ranjus became frightened and asked if that man was also a student. Laika confirmed this and noted with an awkward smile that he really was a brute. She also didn't think she would face her cousin in her first battle. Sandy threateningly said that this was an excellent chance to finally wake up. She would personally give them a good beating. Then she would definitely remember her position and goal. She accepted her challenge with a smile, and Aegis, smiling, showed Zik his stone and said, "It looks like the first battle will be with them." He's even glad. It will be interesting. NC was glad that he was on the same wavelength with him. He was also looking forward to this fight. So the first fight between the East and North Corps began. Rick entered the arena, very worried and nervous, but he tried to convince himself and Zik that he would definitely snatch victory. Laika worriedly asked if he was okay. He was so nervous. Teach asked, "Are both participants ready?" Then the fight began. As soon as he gave the signal, Rick furiously rushed into the attack, and NC wondered how it would all work out. Laika asked, judging by his condition, he was serious, right? He said that in a world where everything is decided by victory and defeat, there are no guarantees. Of course, it doesn't concern him. His victory is guaranteed. She noted that no one asked about him, and he said seriously, "Be that as it may, judging only by strength, Rick is not much inferior to the fighter of the North Corps. If they fight as usual, then this is a fight that can be won." Laika noted that they definitely wouldn't be able to fight like usual now. This was their first time fighting in front of such a crowd. Besides, it was a team battle, so the pressure was pretty intense. Zik glanced at Sandy and Vanille with a smirk, saying that those two were a clear exception. Laika thought about the fight with her cousin, and he noted those two had already reached the 4-star rank. They wouldn't be so easily broken. This Sandy, Laika's cousin, probably had the same fighting style. This would be a good shake-up for her. Meanwhile, Rick was defeated, which made Aaron very nervous. She needed to win to compensate for his loss. She was so worried that Laika herself began to worry about her and began to reassure her. And in the end, she lost too. They both tearfully apologized to Zik, but he only smiled in response, understanding that they had completely lost under the pressure of the arena. He told them not to worry. If this were a battlefield where life and death were at stake, the conversation would be different. But here they were simply competing in strength and learning from each other. No one was killing anyone. Tough trials like today should be endured in a safe environment. That's how you gain experience, and today's mistakes will one day, on a real battlefield, become their strength. They will become a stepping stone to their growth. They excitedly answered him that they understood everything, and he said, "Still, 2 defeats at once is already serious. It looks like the next battle will be decisive." He turned to Ranjus with a smile and asked, "Is he right?" He was very scared and asked them not to make him even more nervous. He had been very nervous since this morning. Besides, his opponent wasn't that same scary high school student. Seeing his terrible look, Ranjus rushed into Zik's arms in tears, and he asked, he had already fought high school students at the selection, hadn't he? He replied that there was no one so frightening among the elders of the Eastern Corps, and besides, he would have to defeat such a scary guy in front of such a crowd. NC stroked his head, trying to think of something, and then threw an arm over his shoulder and, with a smile, told him to take a closer look at his opponent. "What weapon does he have?" He confusedly answered that he had a sword, and Zik said, "That's right, his opponent is a man with a sword. He should not think about anything else. If the opponent thrusts with a sword, let him deflect the blow, and if he chops from below upwards, then he needs to retreat. If he chops from above downwards, then he needs to step forward and thrust. Just let him, as always, think about only one thing, how to act against a sword." Ranjus thought about his words. He immediately stopped trembling with fear, and Zik thought, after all, he has a high concentration of attention. Now he still needs external help to concentrate, but if he learns to enter this state on his own, he can rise even higher. How much will he grow by accepting this fight? He entered the arena, and the spectators were sure that such a puny guy couldn't defeat this brute. But Ranjus didn't listen at all. As soon as the commander announced the start of the fight, the brute pounced on the boy with a 3-leaf sword technique. The first leaf, slash. Ranjus reacted quickly and jumped aside, but his opponent immediately rushed after him, striking. He deftly dodged each one. Laika even began to worry about him, and Selena said, "It seems he's keeping the distance that's most comfortable for him to fight at." Raymond worriedly asked Zik if he'd be okay, and he told them not to worry, just let them look at his eyes. He was so focused on his opponent. Ranjus dodged more blows, the brute raised his sword above his head, and then the boy used the art of cloud spear and water to deflect the blow. The enemy's sword was deflected, then he intercepted the spear and lunged, striking him straight in the chest. The brute immediately lost consciousness and fell, and Teach declared the battle over. The third battle. Victory for the Eastern Corps. Having emerged from this state of extreme concentration, Ranjus breathed a sigh of relief, and NC said with a smile, "Perhaps it's time to turn the tide of the battle." Ranjus's victory set the tone, and the Eastern Corps began to steadily gain points. The 4th battle, victory for the Eastern Corps. The 5th battle, victory again. One more battle, the 6th, remains until their complete victory. Laika versus Sandy, and both wield thunder. Sandy said that she never thought that some underclassmen, who weren't even 3 stars, could stand up to the Northern Corps. Laika asked, didn't she tell her they were quite strong? Her cousin looked up thoughtfully and admitted that she had underestimated her comrades. But that wasn't the problem at all. She released her lightning, which made her cousin nervous, and said, comrades are secondary, and if she wants to become the leader, she herself must have tremendous strength. And at the same time, she is only 3rd in the Eastern Corps. Does she even understand how dangerous this situation is? Laika answered her that she understood everything, looked at Zik, who nodded at her, and confidently stated she was not going to give up. Besides, she could even defeat her. Sandy measured her with a glance, and then suddenly disappeared from the spot and appeared behind her cousin, saying, if that is so, then let her show her what she is capable of. She struck with her sword. Laika immediately blocked it, and then her cousin suddenly appeared right in front of her and struck again. Vanille watched them carefully, as he thought the advantage was on Sandy's side. How long could Laika hold out against an opponent who wielded a thunder greatsword even better than her? Meanwhile, Sandy peppered her cousin with blows, taking one and getting wounded, and immediately increased the distance between them. She immediately tried to calm down. Everything was fine. The wound wasn't deep. She just needed to catch her breath. Ranges worriedly noted that Sandy was too strong. She had pinned Laika down like that, and in an instant at that. Raymond said he heard Laika had trained under her as a child. Meanwhile, she lunged for an attack. Sandy slowly took a step to the side to dodge and said her habit of mindlessly swinging her sword when she was pinned to the wall had not gone away. Laika ignored her words and pounced on her with a lightning flash technique, and she used a discharge. A roar echoed across the arena. Sparks of lightning flew in all directions, and Laika was electrocuted, causing her to cry out in pain. Sandy looked her over and said, as she thought, her strength was no good. Her bad habits still hadn't disappeared, and she hadn't even become the strongest in the East Wing. If she had transferred to the North Wing, she wouldn't have let things come to this. After catching her breath, Laika stood up and declared that she hadn't lost yet, and then her cousin told her to give up. At her level, she couldn't beat her. If things were going to turn out this way, she should have gone straight to her father from the start. She should have dragged her to the North Wing, even if she had to force her. Laika firmly pointed her sword at her, silently saying that she wouldn't give in, and Sandy called her stubborn. But if that was the case, then let that be a lesson. She disappeared from the spot, appeared behind her, and she immediately turned around to respond to the blows. But her cousin kicked her in the stomach, causing her to lose her balance, and immediately began slashing at her with her sword. Laika fell on one knee, unable to withstand it. Then her cousin pounced on her in a jump. All her friends were very worried about her, and NC said, it looks like she is about to enter a new level. Sandy ordered her cousin to stop, let her finally give in, but Laika stood firmly in place, preparing to take her heavy blow. After that, Sandy swung her sword from top to bottom, using a secret technique, and a roar was heard. Everyone already thought that this was the end of the fight, as did Sandy herself, but to their surprise, Laika stood firm. She looked at her cousin with a smile and asked, so this is her thunder greatsword technique? Sandy was surprised. That blow should have finished her off, and Laika agreed. Previously, that would have been enough to end it all, but she'd been training hard for the past 5 years too. The fight isn't over yet, it's just beginning. Before the fight, MC asked, what happened? This isn't like her, Laika. Is she nervous? Laika replied, well, her opponent is Sandy's sister herself. She's the only one who made her seriously study her technique, Thunder Great Sword. The basics were taught to her by the current head of the DuPont house, her uncle, but everything beyond the basic knowledge was taught to her by her sister. That's why Sister Sandy is like a mentor to her. MC thought about it, and Laika said, and she has never been able to defeat her. Although over these 5 years of training, she has definitely become stronger. But Sister Sandy has too. Now, of course, she was speaking emotionally, but she can't say that she will definitely win. Zik said, I understand. If that's so, let her remember her training with him. She needs to remember all 5 years of training. Laika frowned and pursed her lips, and MC asked, was it really that she didn't like it? Her main problem is when emotions take over. Her field of vision narrows. That's why all these 5 years he trained her to keep a cool head in battle and not lose concentration. Laika said, yeah, he used to attack emotionally, indiscriminately. Yeah? MC winked and said, that's even cute. Laika asked with displeasure, where did he see cute? Here. Zik said, in any case, the results of her training are obvious. Now she should be able to calmly, on the move, read the enemy in battle too. Laika said, maybe so, but how much will this help her in the fight against her sister? MC extended his fist to her and said she will understand this only when she fights her. She has the ability to see the enemy's movements, and if she uses it, it will have a colossal effect. Besides, she receives instructions from the strongest from him, so past defeats don't matter anymore, right? Laika said, easy to say. But still, thank you, Zik. Thanks to him, she was able to relax. MC smiled and said, and also she said that her sister made her take full advantage of the Thunder Greatsword. Yes? Laika answered, yes. MC cried out, great. Then this is a great chance. Pointed his finger to the side and said, just like in training, she needs to carefully observe her opponent's Thunder Greatsword. If she does this, she will become stronger. After a while, Laika said, she gave her the opportunity to carefully observe her Thunder Greatsword technique. Taking hits, she watched, and she thinks she finally saw something. Sandy asked, what? Laika rushed forward and swung her sword, and Sandy's eyes widened and thought, stop. No, too late. Laika attacked her, and Sandy screamed. What? Laika used Thunder Sting and directed it towards Sandy, knocking her back. She screamed, why so fast all of a sudden? She cried out loud as flashes of lightning pierced her. Laika said, it's a change of pace, something she had but what she lacked. Once she understood, she was able to reproduce it right away. Sandy said, what? No way. Can she already repeat it? Ranjit screamed, wow. Laika. Selena screamed. Her movements suddenly changed. MC happily said, yes. As expected, in a fight with someone who uses the same technique, you can learn a lot. Rick asked, Zik, does he know why Laika's movements suddenly changed? Zik answered, during the fight, she managed to adopt the technique of her sister's Thunder Greatsword. This is the result of his training, to take a blow and at the same time calmly observe the opponent's technique. The guys looked at him questioningly, and he said, before, Laika would immediately lose her cool in battle, and she had no concentration left. She only saw her own sword. But now, everything is different. Now she is calm enough to observe her opponent. And now, observing that very technique, she has reached a new level. Sandy screamed, it's too early. With such a pathetic blade. Laika made a lightning-fast strike, and Sandy flew to the side and screamed for her to lose. Laika screamed, if we are talking about physical training, then actually she trains with someone to the point of death. Sister Sandy. And this is her Thunder Greatsword technique. Heavenly Thunder. The attack was directed towards Sandy, and she screamed loudly. Laika began to breathe heavily, and Sandy got up and laughed lightly. She said, she has become stronger, Laika. She fell to the ground, after which a voice was heard. The end of the fight. Victory goes to the Eastern Corps. Vanille said discontentedly, this girl. Alan asked, Vanille? MC said, great fight. It's a pity, though, that he won't have the chance to fight. Laika said, good that everything was decided on her exit. If she suddenly lost, although she didn't intend to lose, then Zik's opponent would be that very Aegis. MC asked, is he an acquaintance of hers? Laika answered, not exactly an acquaintance. He's very famous. They say he's a genius, the best in the history of the Vanblade clan. Zik grinned and thought, if you look at him, he really does. Among the participants, he stands out noticeably. He's clearly the strongest here. Laika said that even Zik is against him. It's unknown how it would have ended. Teach came out onto the field and said that it had been decided that the victory belongs to the Eastern Corps, but the test will be held until the end. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise, and MC asked, what? Aaron said, it's strange. After all, they said that after 4 victories over the enemy, the test is over. Zik thought, I wonder what they're planning. Aegis smiled, and MC said, well, whatever, great. If he can fight, that's enough for him. Aegis said that they lost as the Northern Corps, but he's happy to fight him like this. MC asked, did he really want to fight him? Aegis replied, of course. He's the captain of the Eastern Corps, right? Even though they have that same Laika. Of course I wondered who he was. They say he has the blood of the current leader, but as he can see, he only has 2 stars so far, right? And despite this, he became captain, not Laika, who has 3 stars, so he would be happy to fight him. MC froze, and then said as he thought, they are similar, right? He also wants to fight once. Aegis asked again, right? And he too? Zik said, there are many good warriors in this arena, but he is special. He heard that he is famous, at this age and already the genius of the century. Naturally he wants to fight him. Aegis said, great, it's getting more and more interesting. He thought, he hasn't held a sword for a long time. Teach said, the 7th fight, they can begin. Aegis rushed forward and shouted, they began. MC grinned and said, he covered such a distance in 1 step. This is a magnificent technique. Aegis used 1,000 strikes in 1 sword, light blade. Zik thought, starting with the blade, the sense of presence disappeared. But Aegis asked, what? He thought he dodged. He turned in a split second. He said he thought it would definitely hit. MC replied, yes. Actually, that was a great strike. Let him show more. Aegis said, that's how it is, as expected. Then, he used 1,000 strikes in 1 sword, as well as a wave blade. MC happily said, this strike is hard to read. He looked carefully ahead and did a somersault using a turbulent stream. He happily said, wow. He wasn't planning on letting him get close to him yet, but Aegis swung his sword and used a light blade, lightning. MC screamed, how hard it is to read his technique. He thought, this is genius. He changes unpredictably, and at the same time does not lose either the speed or the force of the strike. The energy flows without a single loss. He accurately read his breathing, rhythm, and struck. This is only possible through constant training. This is simply amazing. Zik jumped back and Aegis said he never thought that he wouldn't be able to reach him at all. This is really cool. How does he train anyway? MC asked, was he curious? He offered to train with him. Well, they'll talk about it after the fight. MC clenched his fist and rushed to attack, and Aegis screamed, this is some insane power. He can't believe that he only has 2 stars. Zik thought he even changed his breathing and he's adapted to this. He's much stronger than he thought. Aegis said, and yet, since he went on the counterattack, does that mean he's already finished with observation? MC answered, well, to some extent. Aegis asked, does that mean he's already figured him out? Then, he rushed to attack, and MC said thoughtfully, he's doing the same. He used Swift Shadow and attacked Zik, and then said, he'll live up to his expectations. Does he want? Will he show him more? MC crouched down on his knee and asked, was he able to wound him? He smirked and said, now it's getting really interesting. After a while, Sandy came to her senses and asked, where is she? The guys ran to her and asked, Sandy, is she okay? She answered, yes, that's how it is. She lost. She asked to forgive her. If only she hadn't lost. The girls screamed, that's she. It's all their fault. They asked to forgive them for letting her down, Sandy. She nodded her head and said, they didn't let anyone down. It's just that the enemy was too strong, that's why. She suggested that next time they try together and win. The guys screamed. Yes, Sandy asked, by the way, has the battle between the Western and Southern Corps already begun? The girl said, about that. For some reason the battle continues, be that as it may, she needs to see. There's an incredible battle going on right now. Sandy screamed. What? What is that? She thought, 5 blades of aura, that is. She screamed, is that same Aegis fighting at full power? After all, he's the strongest of them all. 1,000 strikes, 1 sword. 5 shadows, 1 strike. Aegis screamed, isn't that working either? Besides, he wasn't even out of breath after that fight. What kind of body is he? MC replied, he's seriously pumping up his basic stamina, isn't he? Combat techniques are good, but the foundation is important too, right? Aegis replied, it seems so. He swung his sword and screamed. From now on, he'll strengthen his physical form too. He directed mana towards Zik, who thought, blade sharpness, hardness, formation speed, range. Overall, the blade itself is only slightly above average, but given his age, something interesting can come out of him in the future. And in this fight, he finally realized, that's the difference between the past and the present. 1,000 years ago, the main thing in martial arts was the attack movement itself. The true essence of martial arts is to express all existence through one's own technique, and true energy served only as an auxiliary tool. But now, by materializing true energy, he is able to embody reality itself. In other words, it is the handling of true energy that is the essence of martial arts in the modern age. And he also got too carried away with just fighting technique and realized it too late. So 1,000 years, is that so interesting? Aegis looked at MC and thought, he is perfectly withstanding all his attacks. He really is different from the others. Ranjas said, they have been fighting for 2 hours and there's no end in sight. Laika said, they are both clearly insane, but she thinks the end of the fight is near. Aegis asked, it seems like he completely understood his moves this time, huh? MC smiled and replied, yes, that really was cool. Aegis said, yes, he thinks so too. Zik said he would show him his respect, so what he learned in this fight, he would grant him a new technique here and now. Aegis smiled and said, I understand. He can't defeat this. But he used the 1,000 blades style, the one sword school, a secret technique. 15 blades, the ultimate strike. Aegis said he would now see his movement technique. Zik used the dragon slaying style, its second form and modification. Star Fist. Everything around began to crumble and fiery fists appeared in the sky. It attacked across the arena and everyone tried to defend themselves. The guy asked, what kind of power is this? Sandy asked in surprise. Who won? Teach said enough. The end of the fight. Aegis lay on the ground and said, he can't move a finger. This is incredible power. He himself still needs to train and train. The Eastern Corps won. The students shouted loudly. What kind of battle is this? It can't be. Could Aegis really lose? Who's that guy from the East Corps? Teach said that after the arena is put in order, they will begin the duels between the West and South Corps. Everyone, get ready. Raymond shouted joyfully, this is incredible. Zik, defeat Aegis himself. Laika smirked and said, he's ruined everything again. He's weird. You can't help but notice. MC said, and these are her words after he won? Oh well. Who's next? Laika said, yes, another candidate for the next leader, Veniel, will be joining the fight. MC said, the West Corps is generally very strong, but there are some strong guys in the South Corps too. He wonders what will come of it. However, despite Zik's assumptions, the West Corps won a crushing victory in the battle between the West and South Corps. After the fight with Aegis, MC said, he overdid it a bit. Such destruction can't be repaired quickly. Ranjas said, everything is fine. He told him to look at this. MC screamed, what the hell is that? Ranjas replied, a rare stone etherlight is used throughout the arena. If you infuse it with true power, it restores its original form. MC thought some incredible thing has appeared again. He was surprised, and Ranjas said, using such an expensive material on this entire huge building, that's incredible. Teach thought, that's strange. Was he really that strong to easily defeat Lil Sonar? Veniel asked, well, should we continue? Teach said, the battle is over. Victory goes to the Western Corps. The final battle, the Eastern Corps against the Western Corps. It starts in an hour. The guys carried Lil out in their arms, and Laika looked at them and said, that can't be. Lil herself lost. MC folded his arms and said nothing. He thought, something's clearly wrong. The power levels of these two weren't that different, which is why this girl's true energy movement was so bad. It was clear from her behavior that this wasn't her usual state. Something was wrong here. That's why the defeat was so crushing. And that inspector obviously noticed something too. He wondered what was going on. Raymond frowned and said, it can't be. Lila from the Sonaru house herself couldn't put up any resistance. Well, yes. The future head, this is a completely different level. Selena said, but that's too much. It's not even a fight, but a beating. Aaron said, yes, but maybe that's how it should be. After all, this is the first time they've seen the strength of good fighters from other corps. Rick said, well, if you think about it, he's on the level of candidates for the head of the family, like Zik and Laika. As expected, Vineal also has incredible strength. The girls answered, well, yes. Ranjis stood silently to the side. Rick looked at him and asked, what happened? Ranjis answered, nothing. It's just that Vineal, of course, was very strong, but the fighters from the Western Corps are powerful too. He apologized for saying such things before the battle. Aaron said, no, he's right. She lost even in this battle, and as offensive as it is, they can't stand against the Western Corps. Rick said, and that's her. What can we say about him? He couldn't even beat those with few stars. However, he clenched his fist and shouted, despite this, he's not going to lose. If they can defeat those stronger than them, they should be able to win too. Aaron screamed, he's right. MC looked in their direction and thought, they have good fighting spirit. Rick and Aaron seem to be growing, but now the problem is here. It seems Laika didn't notice the change in that girl's true energy. If we consider that the result of the last battle is all Vineal's power, then her confusion is understandable. But since he himself doesn't understand all the details, he can't give rash advice. Ranjis asked, Laika, is she okay? She replied, yes, thank you. She turned around and said she needed to get her thoughts together. Ranjis watched her go. Laika came to the garden to the fountain and wondered if Vineal had really become so strong that he could defeat Lil so easily. Even Aegis couldn't have crushed Lil like that. She managed to survive without a single scratch, and he, Vineal, could do it. She touched the water and thought, the last time she fought him was when she was 5 years old, and then she lost. Since then, she trained with all her might to take revenge on him, and she already thought that she had finally caught up with him. And despite this, if the fights go in order of strength, Vineal's opponent will most likely be Zik, and she involuntarily exhaled a little, because she wouldn't have to fight him, and she was disgusted with herself for feeling relieved. It would be the same as admitting defeat. Laika clenched her fist and thought, she must defeat him. Vineal came up to her from behind and asked, what's wrong? What's with that serious look? Laika turned around and asked, what's wrong with him? They had nothing to talk about. Vineal asked why she was so prickly. But if he became the head of the clan, she might become his wife. Laika told him to shut up. She would be the head. She walked past him, and he asked, she thought she couldn't beat him, right? No wonder. She couldn't beat him before either. She had just seen that fight, right? And that's why. He put his hand on her shoulder and asked, she was finally convinced she couldn't win, wasn't she? Laika told him to shut up. Vineal told her to admit it already. She could never beat him. Not now, not before. Let her give in and submit to him. Then he will take care of her. Laika pushed his hand off her shoulder and told him to shut up. Vineal said, look, she's so prickly, but everything has already been decided. He turned around and said, it's finished with her. He knows what to do next, right? Alan said to rely on him. By the way, what to do with that bastard? Vineal said there won't be any problems with that, even during the duel. Alan said that he may be a bastard, but he was the one who defeated Aegis. Shouldn't they act preemptively? Vineal said that, of course, it's best to prepare in advance, even before the duel, but he seems to have an overly keen sense. If he suspects something, it will only be unnecessary hassle. Besides, as far as he managed to notice, it was as if he was deliberately exposing himself to blows. So, everything can be pulled off even right during the duel. Alan nodded his head and said he understood. Vineal lightly punched him in the chest and asked, so what if he defeated that Aegis? Yes, that bastard is no match for him without any tricks. In this duel, victory will be theirs. Rick said, well, they're starting. He thought, even though they were seniors, they were the weakest among the Eastern Corps fighters. But the Western Corps, no matter how you look at it, was made up of the elite, and they, and he. Rick asked, will he be able to win? At that moment, MC punched him in the back of the head and said, he's an idiot. Where did his fighting spirit go? Rick said, this. MC screamed, Rick, what is he even gonna fight for? To lose? Rick said no. Zik said, if he's gonna fight, he needs to fight with the intention of winning, no matter who's stronger. That's the main thing. Rick clenched his fists and said, win. MC's well trained. He needs more self-confidence. Rick said, yes, thank you. MC said, then perhaps he'll give him some advice at the end. No need to strain yourself so much. The Great Fist technique is a move in which all your strength is concentrated in one point and thrown at the target. If you strain yourself too much, the strength you need to concentrate will just dissipate. That's it. He needs to relax. Relax. Rick screamed, yes, he thinks he can win. Zik smiled and said, great. Then off to the victory. Laika said, it's all strange, of course. MC looked ahead questioningly and she asked, he didn't study the Great Fist technique, right? And yet he's very well versed in it, and he's suspiciously knowledgeable in other martial arts too. Laika asked why that was. MC looked at her and asked, isn't that weird? She widened her eyes at him in confusion, and he smiled and said, because it's him. Laika said, she shouldn't have asked him a serious question in the first place. Rick frowned and thought, he saw this guy in the first fight. He's very strong, but there's no way he's gonna lose this time. Liam said, a weakling who lost to a guy from the Northern Corps is still acting so tough. Rick told him to shut up. He's different now. Liam chuckled and asked again, different. Teach said, the Eastern Corps versus the Western. The first fight, we can begin. Liam told Rick not to talk nonsense. A person can't change in just a few hours. He used the art of the battle bug dagger, namely the praying mantis strike, and rushed to attack. Rick flew back, and Liam smirked and asked, Can he already cover himself with aura? But they will see if it will save him from the next blow. Rick screamed loudly, and Liam screamed. What happened? What is it? Hasn't he changed? Rick frowned and thought, after all, he is strong, but still, he will not allow himself to be simply beaten. He swung his fist, and Liam said how stupid he is. There is no way he will touch him with such an attack. He hit him on the head with the blade, and Rick thought, if he continues like this, there is no way he will pin him down. What to do? That's it. He needs to relax. Relax. He remembered MC's words, that the Great Fist technique is a move in which all the force is gathered in one point and falls on the target. It's either all or nothing. Liam screamed, but he is a weakling. He used Bee Sting, Lightning Strike, and shouted, he's resilient. Rick smiled and said, he caught it. Liam asked again, what? He was surprised. This guy, he caught the sword and stopped it. Rick concentrated his strength in his fists and ordered them to receive. He used the Great Fist technique, Mighty Fist, and attacked Liam. Teach said, it's over. The student's eyes widened in surprise, and Teach said, he's defeated the Eastern Corps. Rick was surprised at first, but then rejoiced and yelled, yes. Liam sat up and asked, he really lost. Vineal called out to him, and Liam knelt before him. He apologized, and Vineal threw him aside. He turned to the others and asked, they got it, right? They must crush them. The student screamed, yes. Rick raised his hand and shouted, Aaron, good luck, she can do it. She clenched her fists and answered, yes. Carl looked at her with displeasure, and Teach said, the second battle has begun. Aaron rushed forward and screamed loudly, using the Scarlet Fire sword technique. A strike of a sparkling blade, Carl dodged the attack and prepared for his own. He directed mana towards Aaron, and frowning used the Great Raging Spear technique, chaotically piercing the armor. Aaron clutched her stomach and crouched on the ground, and Carl prepared for another attack. Ranjis asked, why did it come to this? A bright spray of blood flew to the side, and Selena screamed, this is too much. Laika screamed in irritation, that idiot. Rick rushed forward and screamed, he's an idiot. Raymond grabbed him and said, no. He hasn't declared the end of the battle yet. If he interferes now, they will lose due to a foul. Teach said, it's over. The Western Corps has won. Rick lifted Aaron's body and shouted, Aaron, is she okay? The MC stood behind him, looking on with displeasure. The students were asking Aaron to hold on. Aaron. Everyone around started whispering, is this okay? They thought it was too much. Rick turned around and shouted, was it really necessary to let it come to this? Carl turned around and asked, what's the problem? Rick shouted, what? Carl replied, this is a competition. In other words, it's a real battle. He simply did everything necessary to ensure victory. Rick yelled, even if this is a battle, he went too far. Selena screamed, exactly. They didn't have to go that far. Carl responded, how naive. They, from the West Corps, show no mercy in a real fight. Their goal is simple, crush the enemy, that's all. Laika asked, is this Vanille's order? Carl asked, so what? If they don't like it, they should withdraw from the fight. Don't they understand that if the referee didn't stop the match, then everything is fine? She still wanted to fight, so he simply broke her will. Isn't that self-evident? Laika cried out in irritation. Yes, they. Carl turned around and said, stop chatting already. Instead of worrying about her own, she should think about herself. The same fate awaits them all anyway. Retin came onto the field and said, that's it. If they don't like it, they can withdraw from the competition. Ranjis. He looked up and said, Retin. Retin asked discontentedly. Who was he to call him by his first name so casually? So what? He's not going to withdraw? Ranjis remained silent, and Retin asked, does he want to get beat up like that girl? He won't interfere? Or maybe they'll repeat what happened in the village? Ranjis, he's a pathetic idiot. Laika cried out in irritation. Ranjis said, it's okay, Laika. He won't run away. Laika turned around and said, Ranjis. He spoke. Today he will defeat him, Retin. Retin asked discontentedly, what? Everyone around froze from what they heard, and Ranjis exhaled and suddenly heard a voice that called him. He jerked violently and asked why he heard Zik's voice. MC told him not to be so nervous. He will just repeat what happened a few years ago. Ranjis spoke. Where to even start here? Zik said, that's not the main thing. He used this technique to give him advice. Ranjis asked again, advice? MC answered, there are such words. Serene clouds, murmuring water. Ranjis asked again, clouds? Zik answered, clouds floating serenely, water murmuring calmly. When he is in trouble, he should remember these words. Teach asked what he is doing. Ranjis apologized and nodded his head. Teach said, the Eastern Corps against the Western Corps. The second battle. They have begun. Ranjis used the clouds and water technique. Piercing water. He rushed to attack, and Retin screamed, weakling, no need to pretend to be tough. He used the snake attack technique, a piercing attack. He attacked Ranjis and screamed, and with such a level he was still showing off. Terrible weakling. Ranjis readied himself and thought, he will attack again. Retin used the sword technique. Snake attack. Snake writhing strike. He wounded Ranjis. He screamed and thought, he blocked it. Why did the blow bend? Retin shouted joyfully. Well, what is he doing? Let him try to respond. If he can, of course. Ranjis answered, he's capable of something too. He used the clouds and water technique, namely, floating clouds, flowing water. Retin smirked and blocked the blow, ordering him to fly away from here. Ranjis flew to the side, and Laika screamed in fear. Ranjis. He got up and thought. He tries to parry and counterattack, but he uses all his moves against him. Retin asked, does he think he can use his moves in counterattack? He grinned and said, he made fun of him, poor guy. He wants to tell him what his signature technique is? Counterattack. Poor him, but he is several levels higher. Ranjis asked, how so? Retin grabbed him by the hair and said, he doesn't know what he was thinking. The offspring of a false dragon can't become strong, right? In the end, he's the same as his father, just a weakling. Ranjis ordered him not to dare mock his father. Retin slapped him in the face and screamed, He's a fake. He will never surpass a real dragon. He began to kick Ranjus and scream. Ranjus thought it didn't work after all. He thought he had become stronger, but it was a mistake. In the end, he was still weak. He was a fake after all. He lay on the ground and cried. He remembered his father asking Ranjus if he liked fishing. He answered happily, yes, very much. His father asked, is that so? Just like him. He knew his father liked to fish like this, looking at the clouds and water. Ranjus asked if he liked the clouds and water. His father said yes. The clouds float calmly, and the water in the river always flows tirelessly. When he looks at this, he begins to think that all human problems are such a trifle. Ranjus hummed thoughtfully, and his father said, soon he will understand this too, Ranjus. Currently, he was lying on the ground and whispering, floating, flowing. Teach looked at them attentively, when suddenly Retin screamed, that's it. In the end, he's no different from his father. He swung his fist and ordered him to live on, groveling like a fake. Ranjus, the clouds float serenely, the water murmurs calmly. He released mana towards Retin, who cried out in displeasure. What? Teach chuckled and said, this. Ranjus was covered in mana, and Retin screamed, it can't be. Is this really it? He means to say that he got 3 stars? His hands shook and he said, he won't admit it. For some fake to stand on the same level as him? No way. He will never admit it. He used the snake sword technique, a writhing strike, and sent it towards Ranjus. He frowned and quickly dodged the attack. Retin thought displeasedly, he just hit him. Did he really see through him? No, this can't be. He used a chaotic snake flurry and screamed, well, what about this? How does he like that? Ranjus stood his ground and Retin screamed, what is this? Laika said. Ranjus. MC interrupted her and said, yes. Ranjus took another step towards the true essence. Laika asked again, the true essence? Zik answered, the clouds float calmly, the water flows tirelessly. No matter what happens, they cannot be stopped. Softly, flexibly changing shape, he must absorb all the power and redirect it. He already showed a little of this in the last fight. In this fight, Ranjus managed to master this technique, Laika said, in such a short time. MC said, but apparently he himself does not realize it. After all, his ability to focus is incredible. Retin screamed, what is happening? A nightmare. He ordered not to approach him. Ranjus frowned and attacked him. MC grinned and said, yes, that's it. Water can do more than just flow gently. Retin screamed, nightmare. Why is it so strong? Once the water rages, there's no one who can resist the flow. Ranjus attacked the enemy and he screamed loudly, flying back. Teach said, it's over. The Eastern Corps was defeated. The knocked out Ranjus asked in surprise, what happened? Laika joyfully screamed. Ranjus. He turned around and asked, Laika? She screamed joyfully. He was amazing. He reached the 3-star rank and immediately knocked out the enemy. This is simply incredible. Ranjus asked, 3 stars? He won? He screamed loudly. Did he really win? Selena answered, yes, it was an incredible fight. Ranjus said, Retin, he defeated him? Rick hugged him and told him to listen. He asked, what kind of cool technique was that just now? Ranjus asked again, a cool technique? Laika said, yes. She also wants to know. It's an incredible technique, like a water dragon soaring up a waterfall. Raymond smiled and said how amazing it was. Ranjus asked in surprise, what the hell is that? He doesn't know any cool techniques like that. Rick said, no, it really looked like that. Ranjus looked questioningly at MC, who said, this technique is called Piercing Ascending Dragon. Actually, it's one of the techniques described in the 2nd volume of Cloud and Water Spear Technique, and he only read the 1st volume, right? It's incredible that he figured it out on his own. Ranjus asked again, right? Really? Laika asked how he knew about it. Zik answered, he caught a glimpse of it in the Dragon Hall on the 2nd floor. He can't say that he created this technique, can he? Laika replied, then it's clear. The fact that he reached the level of the 2nd volume on his own isn't that amazing, Ranjus. MC thought, the Cloud and Water Spear Technique is a martial art he created in his past life. But he doesn't think he wrote it down in a book himself, for anyone to learn. Probably, one of his descendants later wrote it down, divided it into several scrolls, and saved it. And to prevent immature disciples from accidentally using it, the true essence was sealed at the upper levels. However, although the path to the true essence was deliberately hidden, Ranjus managed to discover it entirely through his own efforts. What an amazing young talent, Teach said. The East Wing. How long will they waste time chatting? Selena turned around and apologized. Rick shouted joyfully, great. They will continue to crush them like this. Selena said yes, she will try her best. Ranjus set the tone with his battle, and the morale of the East Wing reached its peak. However, the West Wing, having suffered a defeat, also strengthened its own, and the match threatened to turn into a fierce battle. The 4th battle. Selena, although she fought well, lost by a minimal margin. However, in the 5th battle, Raymond took a hard-fought victory, showing resilience, and the outcome of the match will be decided in the 2nd half of the fights. Raymond said he managed to win somehow. Ranjus said he did well. Selena, upset, apologized and said that if she had won, Laika smiled and said, everything is fine. She lost by a minimal margin. Besides, they give 4 points for this match. Now they have 3 wins and 2 losses. There's just a little left until the final victory. She just needs to win, and that will be the end of the competition. She needs to rely on her. MC approached them and called out to Laika. She turned around and asked, what? She screamed loudly and was embarrassed when she saw Zik's displeased face next to her. He asked how she was. Laika answered as usual. She screamed, he was standing too close. She was fine, and she is not going to lose. Zik said yes. Ranjus shouted, Laika, good luck to her. He asked her to try to win. Laika turned around and said, of course. Zik frowned and thought, what is this? He saw dark mana and thought, what is this strange sensation? After a while, Alan swung his leg and shouted, a completely useless pawn. Oh well. Once he wins this fight, everything will return to normal. Laika replied, nothing will come of it, because she will win. East Corps versus West Corps' 6th fight, Teach said. They began. Laika jumped, and Alan looked at her and thought how fast she was. There she is, the very same lightning wielder who surpassed even Sandy. He was able to block the blow and jump aside. Alan thought, this is a battle. He might have lost. Yes, if he hadn't touched Vanille's fingertips. Lightning. Alan rushed forward and said, there is no way she can defeat him. Vanille watched him closely. Laika blocked his blow and stepped back, frowning. Ranja shouted, Laika? MC frowned, and Laika thought, she can't use lightning? Why? Alan asked. Didn't he say so? She can't win. He quickly attacked Laika, and she screamed in pain. She thought, not just lightning, she can't use the true source. A warrior's body is closely connected to the true source, which is located within. One strike, one throw, one step, everything is amplified by the true source. That is, if during a fight the connection with the true source is suddenly lost, any blow dealt by the enemy can be fatal. Alan hit Laika, and she thought, she needs to defend herself. Sandy said to listen. Something is wrong. Something strange is happening to Laika. Aegis said yes. He frowned and thought, Laika's true source is not functioning? What's going on? Laika fell to her knees, and Alan thought, wow, to have lasted so long without the true source. As expected from a candidate for the post of leader, standing on the same level as Vanille, he turned and thought, however. He said, he sees. She's very stubborn, but that was all. Ranjis rushed forward and asked her to stop. Laika, Raymond said. Ranjis. MC darkened with irritation, folding his arms over his chest. Alan swung his sword and Laika looked up at him. Suddenly, Sandy rushed forward and screamed. What was he even thinking? MC exhaled and Alan asked, what was she thinking? So shamelessly interfering in the fight. Sandy ordered him not to pretend. He was about to kill Laika, wasn't he? Everyone's eyes widened in surprise, and Alan said, what is she saying? How stupid. Does she really think he's capable of such a thing? Aegis stepped forward and asked again, really? He also thinks that this blow was too dangerous. Alan asked, what? Are they suspecting him of something? Aegis asked, is he dissatisfied with something? If this offends him, then next time he needs to be more careful about his words and actions. Anyone would see that Laika can't use the true source now. To use a blow enhanced by aura on such an opponent. Vanille entered the arena and said, Aegis, what complaints could a guy who interrupted a match have about their way of fighting? What's wrong with that? In a real fight, the opponent's form doesn't matter. The enemy must be broken to the end. They, the Western Corps, simply view every match as preparation for the real fight. Sandy screamed, but even this should have limits, shouldn't it? A match is not a massacre. Vanille smirked and said, they are naive. That's why they lose. Aegis frowned and Vanille ordered everyone to listen carefully. They, unlike them, aren't playing games here. They're preparing for a real fight. Well, anyway, he thinks this is a fight to the death? What makes him think that? They're just holding back because it's them. So they weren't planning on killing anyone. Okay, but maybe they did break something bad, right? Sandy screamed in irritation. Teach released his terrifying mana into the arena and asked when he ever allowed idle chatter. Sandy screamed, but Alan was about to deal Laika a dangerous blow. Teach ordered her to shut up. Those who lose have no say. Minors are forbidden from interfering in the course of a duel. He decides whether to stop the match or continue it. Aegis apologized. Teach said, the battle is over. The Western Corps has won. Everyone who is not participating in the next duel must leave the arena. Aegis picked up Laika and said, Sandy, Laika's sword. She replied, yes. Ranjis cried out in fear. Laika. Aegis brought her to the students and said she would be fine. He had already given her a recovery potion, but a full recovery would take time, so it would be better to take her to the infirmary right away. Ranjis replied, yes. MC apologized to him for bothering him, and Aegis smiled and said, it's okay. Besides, he was going to intervene too, right? MC replied, well, who knows, who knows. Sandy said, it's still strange. Alan is certainly strong, but for Laika to be so helpless. Aegis said, if you remember the first fight with Lila, the strangeness started even then. Something is definitely wrong with them. He should be careful, Zik. MC looked at the helpless Laika and said, yes, thanks for your concern. He entered the arena, and Vanille asked, pity, huh? He can't beat him. In other words, their defeat, it's a done deal. MC started warming up, not listening to his words. This angered Vanille, and he said, he's an idiot. Teach said, East Corps versus West Corps. The 7th battle. They began. Vanille screamed, that annoying arrogant tone. They'll see how long he lasts. MC quickly punched him in the face, and Vanille flew to the side. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise, and Zik said, for someone who talks like that about a real fight, he's too careless. So what? This is what he wanted. A real fight. He himself said that he fights as if it were a real fight, right? Vanille asked again, so what? MC replied, then he will also fight as if it were a real fight. He's definitely not going to regret this. Vanille said he will. The idiot. What is he even talking about? MC said, I see. After a while, Alan screamed Vanille. MC threw him aside, and Vanille got up and screamed, damn it. He grabbed his broken nose and thought he counterattacked at top speed. And it remained unharmed? Zik said, true power with the nature of the wind. He is also from those notorious 4 great houses, right? So this is the special true power that his lineage possesses. Vanille screamed, idiot. MC asked, by the way, does he understand what a real fight means? He adjusted a little and fought, taking into account his level. Vanille screamed, what? What did he say? MC quickly rushed next to him and said, 2. He hit Vanille and he flew to the side. He thought, what happened? Why is he losing so easily? Zik rushed to the attack and asked what he was thinking about in the middle of a fight. Was he too relaxed? He punched him in the stomach and Vanille fell to his knees. Vanille asked, what was he talking about? MC asked again. He doesn't understand. Of course, that's the number of his deaths. Vanille asked again. What? MC answered the first time. A punch to the face. The second, the neck. The third, the heart. If this were a real fight, he would have died 3 times already. Zik said, he's only alive because he spared him. Vanille asked again. What? MC kicked him and said, they're in a real fight. Enough resting. Sandy asked in surprise. What is this? This isn't even a fight. It's just a beating. Aegis said, looking at this, he understands that for Zik, their fight was just a friendly sparring. But in a real battle here it is, the harsh reality. MC folded his arms and asked, so, did he even understand a little bit about what a real fight is? Vanille sobbed, lying on the ground. Zik said, well, he was right about one thing. On the battlefield, it really was important to finish off the enemy. He and everyone from the Western Corps would definitely become excellent warriors. But this wasn't a real battlefield. Everything here took place under the supervision of instructors, with healing potions at hand. The conditions here were too soft to even talk about real combat. Vanille tried to say something, but MC wasn't listening. He kept talking. In other words, what he called a real fight wasn't even close to it, and he's just afraid to admit his own weakness, right? Vanille loudly ordered him to shut up, shut up, shut up. He released his mana and screamed, how dare he, an idiot, say that to him? Who was he to lecture him? MC asked, teenage rebellion? It can't be helped if that's the case. He'll listen to him, so let him vent all his grievances. Vanille ordered him to shut up. He's telling him, how dare he act smart here as if he knows everything. He used the wind-slicing technique, Stormblade. Vanille frowned and thought, just once, just for a moment, if he can touch it. He ran forward, and Ranjis said, nothing can be seen. Aegis said, it's because it's his power. One of the 4 great families, it's the wind power of the Fafneld house. The aura of those who carry the power of wind is invisible. It can't be seen with the eyes. Sandy said, it's a sneaky power. It suits them very well. Aegis said, well, you can't say that. Although he agrees that it's a nasty thing. After all, continuous invisible attacks. He's a serious opponent. Ranjis said, Zik. Vanille screamed, why? Why can't he hit him? MC asked, what happened? It's so easy if he can see the streams. Vanille screamed, he doesn't understand anything. MC clenched his fist and said to look, there's another gap. He hit Vanille on the head and he turned around and screamed, he's an idiot. Stop it already. He tried to hit MC and screamed, he's an idiot. Little idiot. Zik said, oh, this adolescence. So what? Has he calmed down? Vanille screamed, what do you mean? Idiot. Is he making fun of him? He'll kill him. MC said, that's tenacity. For a fighter, it's commendable, but his body has been at the limit for a long time. He hit Vanille again and said if he continues, he will suffer. In this fight, Vanille grabbed Zik by the leg, and he asked thoughtfully, is he saying he will fight to the end? Vanille released mana and laughed out loud. MC asked, what is he doing? He suddenly became so cheerful. Vanille said, now he is finished. Zik asked again, what did he say? Vanille used the wind-slicing technique and a barrage projectile. MC looked at him carefully and flew back, and the students screamed in surprise. Did he hit Zik? Aegis said, something is wrong with Zik. Selena asked, what does he mean? Laika said, as expected, Aegis. He is insightful. Ranjis cried out with tears in his eyes. Laika, Aaron. Sandy screamed, Laika, is she okay? Rick said, Aaron, she came to her senses. Laika nodded her head and said, sorry for bothering you. Raymond said, Laika, does she know something about what is happening to Zik? What is wrong with him? Laika crouched down and said, not that she knows. More like, she has been in his shoes. She suddenly lost contact with the true source in the last fight. Rick asked, why did this happen? Laika said she didn't know why, but Lil's condition, who fought Vanille in the first battle, was also strange. Come to think of it, maybe she also encountered this problem. If so, then Zik. Ranjis said, does that mean Zik can't use the true origin now? Vanille grabbed his head and laughed out loud. He said, this is what happens when he looks down on him. He frowned and said, he will make sure he can never mock him again. He used the wind-slicing technique. The first secret technique, a hurricane that casts dust into a hurricane. Vanille ordered him to die and waved his hand to the side. Ranjis screamed, Zik! At that moment, MC clenched his fist and hit Vanille in the face. He threw him away. Vanille sat up and asked why he didn't. He looked up in fear, and Laika happily said, it seems Zik was not affected. Vanille asked why. MC replied, it's poison. Vanille thought, it can't be. How did he know it was poison? This poison is impossible to feel. Zik said, now he finally understands why his opponents were losing so badly. So that's what poison is. It only works when the true source is activated. Even he didn't notice it until he activated the true source. Well, he's something. Vanille frowned and said he's sure that poison should have completely blocked his power. Then how did he manage to pull off that attack? MC replied, against a body hardened by training. Such things are useless. Why would he, the greatest of the strong, falter just because his true source was slightly limited? Vanille asked again, useless? He calls the poison he invented useless? MC asked, so he invented it? Indeed, it seems to be harmless to his body. And then through his source it is transmitted to others and begins to affect them. A truly revolutionary poison. To create something like this, it's truly admirable. But it has no effect on him. Vanille thought puzzledly, does he mean to say that he got rid of the poison himself? MC said the unknown poison was interesting, but perhaps that's enough. In the end, only one's own strength decides. If he still relies completely on poison, he still has a lot of growing to do. Vanille asked again what he said. Zik asked, so what? Is he satisfied? He thinks it's time to stop. Vanille clicked his tongue in displeasure. Indeed, the world is full of idiots. As a child, Viniel heard that he needed to achieve the position of clan head at any cost. If he can't become the head of the clan, then he has no value. It looks like Laika has already learned how to use the clan weapon. The candidates for the post of the next clan head are geniuses. Well, except for one. Is he talking about Viniel? To be honest, he had the least chance of all the candidates. He was mediocre, no matter how hard he tried. It only showed his lack of talent more and more. There is nothing to say about the three elders. He was even inferior to the youngest, Rask. The woman screamed. Why can't he handle even such nonsense? Mother severely punished Viniel for his worthlessness, and so, spending day after day, he discovered his talent, poisons. This was his talent. If he has poison, he will be able to fight. He will use it and become the next head, and then, Mother will finally acknowledge him. And despite all this, currently Viniel screamed out loud. What does he even know about him? He was constantly compared to geniuses. Every day, everyone around, no matter how much effort he put in, compared to their talent, he was just dirt. And still, he is always compared to them. Yes, at any cost. Whatever he has to do, he must fight to the end. He ordered not to dare talk about it as if he knows everything about it. MC blocked Viniel's strike and plunged into the thick poison. The students cried out in fear. Zick, zick. Sandy asked, what is he doing? Aegis remained silent in response, and Viniel screamed. Is he relying on poison? Well, yeah, so what? If he can win, then he doesn't care. He has no talent for fighting. But when it comes to poisons, then he has talent too. As long as he has poison, he won't lose. He thought he didn't want to use this poison, but for the sake of victory, nothing can be done. This is smoke with the strongest poison and the needle's scent. Even he himself, their creator, has a hard time finding an antidote. He himself will inhale a little of this smoke, but if he's going to go that far, then for sure. MC grabbed his hands and asked, is this all he has, right? Viniel screamed in fear. What? What is he even? He fell to the ground and MC grabbed him by the shoulders and ordered him to listen to him carefully. He's wrong about one thing. Viniel asked, what? Zik replied, to become strong, talent in martial arts, and even more so the ability to control the true source doesn't matter. The simple desire to win, it's this all-consuming thirst for victory. That's what makes a person strong. And he knows, while he was listening to him, what nonsense is he saying that he has no talent for martial arts. It's just that weapons don't suit him. The iron fan doesn't suit him. He thought about it and said, yes, that's right. He needs something with a longer handle. For example, an umbrella. He thinks that would suit him perfectly. Viniel asked again, an umbrella? Zik replied, he's not joking. Of course, it's a rare weapon, but like the iron fan, it's a weapon with a long history, passed down since ancient times. If you ask him, most things in this world can be turned into weapons. Viniel listened to him carefully and thought, he says, will it suit him? Him? His mother's words were playing through his head. MC grabbed his head and said that for some reason he always laments his lack of talent for fighting. That's not true at all. If you look at it from the perspective of a real fight, he's a warrior no worse, if not better, than the rest. Viniel looked at him in surprise, and Zik said, on the battlefield, as he said, if you manage to win, then nothing matters. If you only talk about the honor and dignity of a warrior, you don't protect anything. To win and protect what's dear to you, you must use any means necessary. That's why he doesn't think he's wrong. It's not his idea that's wrong. It's the situation in which he voiced it that's wrong. Viniel remained silent, and MC told him to come to him. Viniel looked up questioningly, and Zik said that if he comes, he will make him much stronger. Viniel asked again, him? MC answered, well, yes. As he sees it, he's stronger than him, right? No need to worry. If he falls into his hands, he won't need any talents. He won't even have time to complain here. He will make a fighter out of him. Viniel thought, what an idiot. He said all sorts of things here, but MC said, nightmare. He completely forgot. He hit Viniel in the face with his fist and said, they haven't finished the fight yet. Victory is victory. When he wakes up, let him come to him. Viniel fell to the ground and said, he's an idiot. Teach said, this is the end. He wondered who would have thought that he was able to even neutralize the effects of the poison. He said, victory belongs to the Eastern Core. The students were very happy to hear this, and Viniel left discontentedly, holding on to Alan. Teach said, with this, the preliminaries are declared concluded. After a while, they all gathered around the set table. Teach clapped his hands and said, so, now he will explain to them what the special assignment is. Sandy asked, the Eastern Core won, right? Why did they even gather them then? Aegis smiled and replied, who knows? Isn't this what they're going to explain to them now? Everyone started eating, and MC asked, what's wrong? They need to eat faster, or else it will get cold. Laika asked, no. How can he even eat so calmly in this situation? He's not at all interested in what they're going to explain to them now. MC replied, not at all. Laika said, I understand. Teach entered the hall and apologized for keeping them waiting. Well, they can start eating. He looked at Zik and said, although some had already started, they need to eat too. This meal is also to thank them for participating in the qualifying tournament. Well, I guess it's time. He will explain the special mission to them. Aegis raised his hand and asked if they could listen too. Teach said no problem. There's a chance they'll participate too. Aegis asked again, what? Teach said that a special rift was discovered in the Eldragon family's territory a few days ago. Everyone looked at it in surprise, and MC thought, so it's a rift. He thought he read about it in a book that was in the Dragon Palace. Teach said he thought they all had at least a basic understanding of rifts, but they were probably unfamiliar with special rifts. Simply put, it's a rift that can't be passed through by normal means. Laika asked what that meant. Teach replied that this time, a special rift was discovered and it's bound by certain conditions. Only 7 people of rank 3 or lower can enter. If anyone of rank 4 or higher tries to enter, or if the number of people entering exceeds the established limit, they will be ejected. If these conditions are not met, even the head of the family will not be able to enter this special rift. Therefore, these conditions must be met to pass through it. Of course, among the warriors of the Eldragon family there are 3-star fighters, but rifts have been appearing much more frequently lately. So there is a shortage of people now, that's why they were chosen, and this rift has one special feature. It's highly likely to contain magical water, which is needed to awaken magical power. Rick cried out, magical water. MC coughed and said, if he's not mistaken, that's it. Teach said, that's right. By consuming magical water, a person gains the ability to convert true energy into magical power. This is necessary for the body to be capable of using magic. Zik cried out, that's magic, Teach said. As far as they know, this world is ruled by 8 great houses, including them, Eldragon. They are called the 8 Gates of Dominance. However, unlike the other great houses which have sources of magic from which magical water emerges, only House Eldragon does not possess such a source. In other words, their current mission is to pass through a special rift and obtain magical water. Failure is unacceptable. This is an extremely important mission. However, a rift has appeared in the territory bordering House Kerberos, one of the 8 Gates of Dominance. They will likely be hunting for this rift as well. With this in mind, they held a qualifying tournament to select the strongest fighters of 3 stars or lower. Aegis responded, I understand. This means that 7 participants from the Eastern Core, who won the tournament, will be sent on a mission to traverse the special rift. Teach explained that although the Eastern Core ultimately won the qualifying tournament, this does not mean that these 7 people will automatically be part of the expedition team. Therefore, from now on, under the leadership of the Eastern Corps, a squad will be formed from those present to traverse the special rift. Regardless of the results of the matches, they force them to fight to the very end to gain data for decision-making when forming the squad, and to understand the strengths and characteristics of each person's fighting style. Although there were some who were unable to demonstrate their full potential, Vanille turned away and Teach said, so, Zik, he needs to choose the members of the expeditionary force. MC asked again, what? Him? Teach asked. What was he surprised about? Wasn't he the representative of the Eastern Corps? MC replied, actually, he hadn't intended to take on such a role. Laika, it's better for her to decide. She stared at him in confusion, and he smiled and said, just don't forget, his participation is mandatory. Is that clear to her? She replied, well, yes, that's obvious. But is he sure? Zik asked again. What do you mean? Sure? If we let him choose, then he'll be the only one in the force, right? Laika screamed. What is he talking about? Although it's quite to be expected from him, MC asked, right? And then, if she wants to become the head of the clan, then the ability to understand people is also an important experience. That's it. So can he pass this role on to Laika? Teach asked again. He was not against it, but was he really sure? If he leads the squad, he will be one step closer to the place of the next head of the clan. Zik said no, he does not intend to become the head of the clan at all. Vanille shouted. What? Aegis asked again. Does he mean to say that he does not intend to become the head of the clan? Sandy frowned and asked, is he serious? Laika said, he really is serious. MC asked again, so what? It's his business. He decided what is important to him. Aegis asked, maybe so, but if he becomes the head of the clan, then he will get everything that belongs to the Eldragon house into his own hands. Does he understand? Zik replied, he does not need that. He strives for only one thing, the pinnacle of the martial path. Only for that. Enough about him. He suggested that they talk about Laika instead. Come on, she needs to choose who she'll take with her. Laika got up from the table and said, okay, she's choosing. After a while, the man was sitting in a chair, holding a cigar in his hand. He smirked and asked, is what he just said true? The servant replied, yes. A special spatial rift was discovered in the Hoken forest, and more. The man interrupted him and said, it looks like those lizards have already begun to act. So what? Why does he only find out about this now? Everyone was scared and tensed, and the servant bowed and apologized. They skillfully distracted them, so they discovered the rift too late. The man said, by the way, he heard that the lizards who infiltrated the Hoken forest were behaving suspiciously, provocatively. So that's what their goal was. He smirked and asked, judging by their behavior, there's something valuable in that special rift. The servant said that most likely there could be magical water there. The man replied, I see. Then it's not surprising that they would want to get it at any cost. And then what? What are the conditions for entering this special rift? The guy replied, no more than 7 people of 3-star rank and below are allowed. The man said that's not such a difficult condition, but they've already beaten them to it. Those lizards will surely take all the available spaces. The servant replied that it looks like they still don't have the extra forces to send a full-fledged squad there. There is also information that they are sending boys there, whom they themselves are training as future soldiers. The man asked again, so they are not even planning to enter the rift as ordinary soldiers? The servant replied, it looks like that. What will be his instructions? Should they also form a squad of 3 stars? The man replied, it's too late for that. But if they come to the rift with youngsters, there will surely be offspring of this lizard there too. How many more bracelets of deception are left? The guy answered, around 4. The man said, here are his orders. We need to use all the bracelets and wipe out all these youngsters. The servant asked fearfully, Is he sure? They don't know when they'll be able to get the bracelets of deception. The man said, there's no point in fussing over it, otherwise it'll just gather dust in the warehouse. Then it's better to put them to use right now. It'll be much more useful. Besides, he's curious how the lizard will behave if his offspring is killed. He's eager to find out, right?